Oh yeah, alright. This is Billy Shears, aka Paul McCartney. I personally enjoyed this interview with Mike Williams on Vince Russo's Truth with Consequences, and so I'm giving it 2 thumbs up. Oh yeah, take a listen.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to a very, very special edition of Truth with Consequences. Guys, listen, you know, I come on here every day. I've been coming on here forever, and I make it clear to you guys, I am an entertainer. I embellish things. I am over the top about things. I am passionate about things. I get very colorful about things. I am a New York Italian, for crying out loud. But I got to tell you guys something, man. You know, I have interviewed, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in my life. And, bro, a lot of them were characters. You know, you guys know me with the wrestling business, but, bro, I've interviewed celebrities outside of the business, just hundreds and hundreds of people. And guys, you know, I use the term mark a lot. I have no problem admitting when I'm a mark for somebody. I come out here and say it. I have no problem saying it. Guys, I got to tell you something. When I was I remember it vividly. I was a 7-year-old kid. I was at the bowling alley with my sister in Center East, Long Island, bro. And this talk started generating, bro. You know, bro, I'm probably, 7, 8-year-old kid at this point. This talk started generating about these clues in these Beatles records that Paul McCartney had died in a car crash. Now, bro, you got to understand, as a 7, 8-year-old kid, it was scary as hell to me. It was haunting to me. I'm just a little kid. So, bro, you know, me and my sister, we had all the Beatles records, bro. The Beatles were still together at that time. Of course, I went back. I listened to all the songs. Strawberry Fields. I'm examining these album covers for hours and hours and hours. Bro, there was a whole magazine that came out that was dedicated to the McCartney hoax. I bought the magazine. I read it page for page. Bro, there was a special. I even believe it was on WOR in New York, hosted by lawyer F. Lee Bailey. And as a lawyer, F. Lee Bailey, bro, picked all these things apart. And, bro, I got to tell you, my reaction was, it scared the hell out of me. Like, holy shit, Paul McCartney died. And, you know, there's a fake Paul walking around. Bro, this is 1967, 1968. Bro, this story has never died. You know, bro, hoaxes, conspiracies come and go. Yeah, bro, Elvis is alive and he's working on a pig farm in Idaho. Bro, listen, conspiracies come and go. This story has been around for over 50 years. So the fact of the matter is, bro, there is no way on this planet that something could be around for 50 years, bro, and have no legs. So you've got to understand that. Andy Kaufman, bro. Okay, yeah, Andy Kaufman is alive. He faked his own death. Has that developed into anything? No. The story with Paul continues and goes on and on and on a daily basis. And, bro, I stumbled across this podcast, man. And you guys know I have put this over 1 million times. The podcast is called Sage of Quay. And there is a gentleman that hosts this podcast by the name of Mike Williams. And Mike more or less has, I don't want to say dedicated his life, because Sage of Quay is a great podcast about a lot of conspiracies. But this is the one conspiracy that Mike has really zeroed in on, and the research he does is incredible. And every time I watch one of his shows, it's something new. I've been wanting to get Mike on the show forever. He was gracious enough to accept the invite. Before we get this show started, I want to give my Patreon shout outs to Jason, Justin Peeler, Sean Presnell, Jeremy Gakin, Brian Adams, Wayne Noon, Ken Sorrell, Lion Ratton, Eddie Gonzalez, Gabber Nagy, and Scott Dryan. I think that's how you say it, Scott. I want to thank you guys for supporting me and supporting our Patreon program. Bro, I have him here with me right now. The great Mike Williams. Mike, I've seen a million of your interviews. Nobody ever gave you that type of an introduction. Nobody.
You are right, Vince. Nobody has ever given me an intro like that.
Mike, I'm a huge mark of yours. I'm a huge fan of yours. And that was the first thing I wanted to ask you, Mike. Mike, I currently believe there's a big conspiracy going on in the wrestling business. And bro, as soon as I put that out there, Mike, you got to, I use bro a lot. Mike, it's that I can't help it. It's a habit.
It's okay.
But Mike, when I started putting this out there, I started getting inundated with hate mail. Then, Mike, I see you, and you are such a gentleman. But I hear what you're saying, and you've mentioned, you may walk away from this, in a couple of months or so, and you say over and over, listen, I'm not trying to convince anybody. Whether you agree with me or don't agree with me, God, I am just giving you the facts, that I'm finding out in my research. I'm not trying to convince, and you don't, bro. You don't try to convince anybody of anything. But Mike, do you get a lot of that negative mail? And for a guy like you that seems like such a nice guy, I hope that's not part of the reason that you may step away from this in a couple of months.
No, I'm not stepping away because of that, Vince. I'm from New York as well, Long Island as well. So I've got thick skin. And so, no, that's not the reason. The reason was because I've been at it heads down for 3 years. And so I started to see where I was repeating to some degree. And I thought to myself, well, I don't want to be doing this just for the sake of doing it. So when very important or significant revelations come forth, then I'll jump back into the game, research it, and I'll present it. So that was really the track I was on. And that's the track I'm still on. So what happened recently, and I guess we'll talk about it later, we don't have to talk about it right now, was the whole thing with 5 toes versus 6 toes. Paul McCartney, right? It's crazy. It's crazy stuff. And we'll get to that, folks. And you'll see how crazy it is, but it is an eye-opener. But yes, I ran into the same thing that you ran into with wrestling. Whenever you lean up against and you push up against people's idols, people that they worship, a world that makes their clock tick, and then you tell them that, it's not how it appears, that there's an illusion, there's a deception, there's a conspiracy. A lot of people go off the deep end. So there's a lot of, I get a lot of trolling. I've been able to filter those people out. It takes time to, push them out of the equation. There's a lot of hatred. I have on occasion been threatened with physical harm for continuing to talk about this. And then you have the hardcore deniers. These are not people that are mean in any way or hostile in any way. They're just so entrenched in wanting to believe in the Beatles and Paul McCartney that they will find any excuse to continue to ride the train, which I'm clearly showing, and you were showing in the wrestling world, that has holes in it. Yeah. But they don't want to look at those holes. They don't want to look at that. They want it to be as they remember it. And, it's as simple as that. So you have a lot of those folks, the hardcore deniers, but they're not hostile, like I said, in any way. They just do not want to use their mind and their logic and reasoning.
Yeah. Mike, I was thinking about you just yesterday, and talk about holes. Just when you think you know everything, you find out something new, and you were on my mind yesterday. Okay, bro. And it's funny, the timing, what was happening yesterday, and then where I was in this book, bro, the memoirs of Billy Shears. Like, bro, we will get into this heavily, but I can't even put into words. But Mike, I'm thinking of you because I saw your show about a week ago. You're talking about bro, I just love the fact that when you refer to Paul McCartney, let me make this clear to everybody, because you're going to see this throughout the show. He's Billy to you. I mean, yeah. There's no ifs and buts about it. There's Billy and there's biological Paul for you. And I was completely fascinated, and you're going to enjoy this story, I think. I'm watching you the other day, and you're talking about, in May, you just went to see Billy in concert. 36 songs, and, you get into some of the songs. But you said something very interesting. I mean, you put over the fact that, bro, like, Billy is 82 years old. He's out there on stage. Bro, he's singing 36 years old. He's 82 years old. So, Mike, yesterday, I come on my computer not realizing it. Oh, happy birthday, Sir Paul. Sir Paul, happy birthday. And I'm seeing 77 years old.
Right.
So I'm saying to myself, wait a minute, Mike doesn't make mistakes. Like, there is no way Mike make mistakes. Mike said, Billy is 82, and now Paul McCartney is celebrating his 77th birthday. Mike, I'm up to the part in the book where Billy Shears says, and I never knew this before, and it blew my mind. I guess when they were filming Magical Mystery Tour, they asked him, it's in the film, how old he was.
Right.
And he said he was 30 years old. This is 1967.
Right.
At the time, in 1967, biological Paul would have been 25.
That's right. There's a 5-year age difference.
Yeah, so Billy Shears, they asked him how old he was. He says, I'm 30 years old. But if they would have done the math, biological Paul would have been 25. But man, Mike, two questions. Number one, I can't believe that was swept under the rug for this long. Like, I didn't even know about that one. And I got to ask you, Mike, how do you feel when you wake up and everybody is wishing Paul McCartney a happy 77th birthday? How does that make you feel?
Well, it makes me realize that, Vince, that you and I are in a very small minority. And, most people, like I said before, they're going to believe what they want to believe. They are in the matrix, and they've got their routine, and they've got their lives, their virtual reality that they live in. And they're going to go along for the ride. And so I just accept it, Vince. I accept the fact that there's going to be a very small percentage of people that are really going to grab onto the truth. The Freemasons have a saying: there are those, or a class of people, that possess the key for knowledge, and there are those that do not. And I've said this on a couple of shows, and a lot of people get very upset with that because it's very binary. The switch is on or the switch is off. See, people like gray area, right? They like to call it their truth, but there's no such thing as your truth. The truth is either on or off. It's binary. Otherwise, it's a perspective. So I approach it from that perspective that, not a lot of people, in fact, most people are not going to grab onto the truth. They'll never stumble onto it. Even if you explain it to them in black and white and you show them illustrations and examples of how something is not the way they think it is, they will reject it. So you just have to come to grips with the fact that that's how the world works, and that's how people operate. And so this is not for everybody. There is a small percentage of people that are, they possess those keys for knowledge, and that's who I'm speaking to. I'm not speaking to anybody outside of that because it becomes a waste of time. Yeah,
it does. I get that completely. Now, Mike, I want to ask you this, and Mike, I got so many questions here. It's ridiculous, but I got to ask you this. You said something a couple of minutes ago, like, Sage of Quay is a conspiracy show.
Yeah.
But you kind of said, bro, like, it's been 3 years now that the Paul Fall conspiracy has been in the driver's seat. Did something happen? Like, what made this become your story? What made this become your trademark? What was it just gathering all this evidence for so long, or was there an instinct where it was like, wait a minute, I really need an instant where I need to put the focus on this?
Yeah, well, let me just say, first of all, Vince, I was always a Beatle freak growing up. So I'm a musician. I write songs, record songs. And so the Beatles were my primary inspiration, along with other bands like Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix and so on. And back in 1968, when Yellow Submarine came out, I remember bugging my father to take me to the movie theater to go see it. So he took my brother and I to go see Yellow Submarine. And then, in 1976, my high school on Long Island was very progressive. And they allowed this.
What are we talking about? I just want to see, what high school we talking about?
Ward Melville High School.
Oh my God! Of course, I went to Sachem.
You went to Sachem.
Yeah,
okay.
So we were rivals. I know Ward Melville.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, the wrestler Mick Foley went to Ward Melville. whatchamacallit, King of Queens went toward Melville. No, we were, yeah, bro. I had many a soccer game against Ward Melville. So go ahead, Mike.
Okay. So they allowed us, the students, to be able to put together presentations, lectures, seminars, whatever you want to call them. And so I had a friend of mine, Adam. Adam had an older brother, Doug, and Doug was probably about 4 or 5 years older than us. And he knew all about the Beatle clues on the albums and the backmasking and all that stuff. And so, I mean, I knew about the conspiracy, about the rumor of Paul's death. And before Doug showed up, myself, I was going through all the clues on Sgt. Pepper and Magical Mystery Tour and all the other albums, Abbey Road. And so when Doug came in, he took everybody through it. I didn't expect to have a lot of people show up, but I had put all these kind of posters around the high school hallways. And lo and behold, when we had the lecture, it was standing room only. But I thought at the time that it was just a great marketing ploy to sell more records, because when that happened, when the rumor came out in 1969, it really came out in 69. It was floating around back in 1966, 67, 68. But in 69, it really came to light. So I thought it was a way to sell records. And in fact, their record sales did bump up when the rumor came out. And then a lot of years went by, and, I believe that the guy that's playing Paul McCartney was biological Paul McCartney. And, I was playing bands and recording music and stuff like that. And then what happened in 2016, I was on Amazon and I was looking for some books, and I don't even remember what books I was looking for. And so Amazon pops up and says, "Hey, you might like this book." And it was the Memoirs of Billy Shears. It was the first edition, the red cover. So I'm looking at it, and I see it's published, self-published, Create Space. The author's name is Thomas Hugh Harriet. I don't know anything about this book. So I read the blurb. I'm like, okay, let me give it a shot. So I ordered the book, I read it, and I just couldn't believe what I was reading. And, the thoughts that came to mind was, well, I don't even know how this guy can write this book without getting sued. Because the McCartney enterprise is extremely protective of its brand. Incredibly protective. Anybody out there want to test it? Try uploading a Beatles song to YouTube. It will be copyrighted. The infringement notice will be like that. You won't even complete the upload. And if you do, it'll be down within 5 seconds. So I read this book, and I was like, wow. And then a good friend of mine who's done a lot of podcasts with me, Sophia Smallstorm, I was telling Sophia about the book, and she says, well, you should come on my show and you should talk about it, present it. And I thought, well, I don't know. I don't know if I want to do that. I really don't know if I want to become a Paul is dead guy. I thought I would read the book. That would be that. I would go on with my life. And so to make a long story short, I kept procrastinating and she kept reminding me. So finally, I did the show in September of 2016, on September 12th. It was the day after biological Paul McCartney's death, September 11th. And it was a 2-hour show, and I did it. And I thought to myself, okay, well, the show's done. That's that. I can go on with my life. And then it was just an avalanche of people contacting me, other podcast hosts reaching out to me. The first was who's become a very good friend of mine now, Mark Devlin, who's done some brilliant work in the whole area of the music and entertainment industry and how it's controlled. And so it continued from there. And so what happened was I used memoirs as a foundation, a starting point to either validate or disprove what was being said in the book. Initially, I thought to myself, as an example, maybe we'll get into this, the Vivian Stanshall piece of it, where Billy says he played the character Vivian Stanshall, right?
Yeah.
When I first read that, first of all, I wasn't even really sure who Vivian Stanshall was, because he was more of a character out in the UK, right?
Right.
But once I got myself familiar with who he was, I had a hard time believing that Billy played this guy. And so to make a long story short, again, I continued to do the research. And the more I researched Vince, the more I could not debunk the book. I was finding that the book was true. And also the book is encoded. So it's encoded in 3 layers. It's got the first layer, which is you read the book the way you would read any book. Then you have a second layer where Tom has bolded out words on each page of the 666 pages. The book is occulted. It's a Masonic book, folks. Right? Tom is a Freemason. He's the author, or what they refer to as the encoder.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the third layer, which is the acrostical coding, which reads up and down.
Right.
Right. So when you read all 3 layers, each layer, the second layer reveals more, and the third layer reveals even more. So by the time you get done with the third layer of the book, you've got the truth. At face value, the first layer, you're going to think that there are threads of fiction running through the book. Okay. And the way it's written in the first layer, you could conclude that. But if you take the extra effort, you go into the second layer, and then you go into the third layer, then you come to the realization that you've got the full story. What Memoirs is Billy's biography. Right? So Billy's reached a point now where his runway is very short. So he came out, he released the first book on September 9th, 2009.
Mm-hmm.
He got the green light because he's under contract. He has signed non-disclosures and confidentiality agreements to play the character. He is the primary permanent replacement, although others have played the role over time.
Mm-hmm.
He says this in the book. We can get into that a little bit. And since 2009, it's been rolling along. And when I picked it up in 2016, and I don't like saying this because I don't want to sound like I'm patting myself on the back, but when I did that show, the conspiracy peaked again.
Mm-hmm.
People got reinterested in the conspiracy. And then in September of last year, 2018, Billy released the second edition, which is the blue covered book. It's the one you just showed the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And the blue book, the newer version of it, contains a lot more information that the red book did not have. And that's because, again, Billy got the green light to be able to disclose more than he had in the red book.
Mike, let me ask you a question. What is the purpose of the 3 encodings? In other words, if somebody picks this up for the first time, like you said, bro, okay, it's going to raise some questions. There could be some fiction in this, but it's an interesting read. So are you saying it was purposely encoded 3 times because basically it's going to take that person that deep to dive into this book? And not only that, Mike, but the thing that fascinates me about you that, Mike, I can't do. Number one, man, I can't do because I can't see and the words are too small. The footnotes. Your information, the information in the footnotes blows my mind.
Right.
So what was that the reason behind the 3 encodings that a Mike Williams would have to come along and really understand what this book is revealing?
Well, I guess I'm a person. I don't want to say I'm the only person because I have a number of friends who I've teamed with who have also read the book, and they've really gotten into it. And we work together as a loose group of researchers to share information. What we have to understand about Billy is that he is a very high level Freemason. And in fact, he's probably out of the Masonic degrees. There's 33 degrees of the Scottish Rite. And in the book, it alludes to the fact very strongly that he's in the illuminated, what I refer to as the illuminated degrees, or the 12 degrees of the Illuminati. So let me just explain to the folks before I get them lost. Think of a pyramid. We always see the pyramid. So the first 33 degrees of the pyramid are the 33 degrees of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. The next 13 degrees, is that right? Yeah, next 13 degrees are the degrees of the Illuminati. So there's 13 degrees of the Illuminati. And above that, there are 20 more degrees of people and beings that we will never, ever know about. So when you add them all together, when you have the 33, the 13, and the 20, you have 66. So there were 66 degrees within the pyramid. And in the pyramid, it's the all-seeing eye. right? This is the controlling entity that controls the reality that we're in. So Billy, being who he is now, Billy, he is an acolyte of Aleister Crowley. He's because of that, he's heavily into mysticism, magic, the esoteric. Okay, so Crowley's religion was Thelema. So Billy is very, very well versed in mysticism and the occult. And so for him, this is how I've pieced it together. He enjoys presenting people with a puzzle. He enjoys testing intellect. So when he put this book out, when people read it, you can read it at face value and you'll get information, just reading it at face value, the way you would read any other book. But if you want more information, if you're really a truth seeker, if you really want to understand how this went down and who I am, and I'd say who I am, I mean Billy, then you're going to have to use your brain. And you're going to have to think through it and process through it. And not only that, but you're going to have to go outside the book to go figure some other stuff out.
Yeah.
And if you have the gumption and the motivation to go do that, then you're going to be a whole lot smarter about this and everything else that goes on in the world. Because one of the things I keep telling people is this book is not just about the replacement of Paul McCartney. It's about the whole power structure that regulates this reality. So I call it the pyramid of power. It's the Illuminati. It's Freemasonry. It's Tavistock. It's mind control. It's social engineering. It's the drug culture. It's Crowley, magic, Luciferianism / Satanism. So you're getting everything wrapped up into one big bundle. And what the book does is it ties it all together. And how does it tie it together? It ties it together through the story of the Beatles and how biological Paul McCartney was replaced by Billy Shepherd, or some people will refer to him as Billy Shears or Billy Campbell. I always say I'm not very concerned about his last name. All we need to know is that biological Paul was out of the picture 53 years ago and somebody else stepped in. So that's why the encoding is very important, because it is a test that Billy is putting out there to see who gets it. What they want to do, Vince, is what I was saying before. There are those that possess the keys for knowledge and those that do not. They want to separate the wheat from the chaff. This is how the Masons think. I'm talking about the very high level Masons going into the Illuminati. This is how they think. This is how they operate. And the other thing is the Illuminati subscribe to Crowley, to Crowley's religion of Thelema. And maybe we'll get into that in a little bit too. So that's why the book is written the way it's written. That's why a lot of people who do read the book don't take from it what I've taken from it, or perhaps what you've taken from it and other people. I don't know. It really is. It's something that's been put out there to test our ability to use our God-given gift of intellect and reasoning. That's how I look at it.
Well, Mike, I think this is going to be a great balance, because I am a guy. First of all, Mike has studied this book on that third level. Okay. I have not. I got through the first level. And guys, I'll be honest with you. You know me. I don't know if I have the intelligence to go through this book and understand this book and encode this book the way Mike has. I really don't know that. But here's what I do know, bro. And here's where I think we're going to get a nice little mix, because I'm going to bring you back to logic. And then Mike is going to bring you through his knowledge. And I just want to say something before we kind of start at the beginning, but Mike said something very key, guys. Let's talk logic now. When I was a little kid, bro, and I realized this, it was probably about 69, Mike. I was probably about 8 years old. And as I got older, here's what I thought. It's exactly what Mike just thought, what Mike just said. I thought, okay, guys, this is a great publicity stunt. Bro, let's face it. The Rolling Stones were red hot at the time. They were on the heels of the Beatles. There was a lot of competition between the Stones and the Beatles. This is a publicity stunt. This is a great way to sell albums. That's what I'm thinking. But also, guys, what's happening as we get into the 70s? And then we get into the 80s. And then we get into the 90s. Now we're into the 2000s. None of the Beatles, even when George and John were alive, nobody ever came clean and said, yeah, it was a publicity stunt. We did it to sell more albums. I mean, bro, in 2000, for a, well, John was passed away by then, but, in 2000 for a Paul McCartney to say, yeah, it was a publicity stunt. The Stones were hot. The boys got together. We thought it was funny. We thought it was creative. That has never been said. And not only has it never been said by Paul, it was never said by any Ringo has never addressed it. George and John, he had never addressed. So here I am, and I'm saying to myself, okay, bro, it's a publicity stunt. In time, it will come out. But it has never come out. And they have never said that. So, right there, bro, like that raises an eyebrow. I want to start here, Mike. I think we have to start at the beginning because this is the first thing that I learned from you, and I was like, holy shit. Guys, you probably knew everything that I know. You know the album covers, 28 If, Strawberry Fields Forever, Backwoods, Turn Me On, Dead Man. You know all that stuff. We all know all that stuff. When I started listening to Mike, man, I realized, my God, bro, like, this is nothing. Like, everybody knows this. This is nothing. And Mike, where I think you have to start, if you think you should start somewhere else, the first thing that when I really started listening to you, I was like, holy shit, was the whole idea of Tavistock. Yeah. Is that the right place to start?
Yeah, it is a good place to start, Vince. So the first thing I should the first answer I should give to questions people have is, why did they do it? So it's a massive psychological operation, and it's about social engineering and mind control. Tavistock is in the business of studying human behavior, steering human behavior. It's about social engineering and mind control. That's the business that Tavistock is in. And Tavistock has been in that business for a very, very long time. And with the Beatles, what they were looking to do, and they did very successfully, was to change a very traditional culture going back into the 1950s. It was very Christian based and so on, to a culture of free love, create the drug culture, create a culture and a society where the traditional norms are broken down. And basically, a mindset that says that if it feels good, do it. And when we take a look at what they have been able to accomplish from, let's just say, the time that the Beatles hit the scene, which is officially 1962, to the time they broke up, which is officially 1970. So if we take a look at that 8-year period of time, all we need to do is take a step back and take a look at how much the world has changed in that period of time. Mm-hmm. It's incredible. And the Beatles were a major force behind it. So Tavistock created the Beatles. The Beatles were never organic in the way that, just four lads came together and they were banging around. They formed a band, and then they were discovered by some guy, Brian Epstein, who owned a record store. And the way the story goes, he started to try to market them and see if he can secure a record contract. And lo and behold, they wind up with EMI, who, by the way, EMI, the record company, record label, has a very long history of being tied to British intelligence. So the Beatles are a creation of Tavistock.
And also, Mike, from what I read, from what Billy tells us, at the same time, the Rolling Stones were created to more or less be the heels. In wrestling, we have baby faces and heels. So basically, the Rolling Stones were formed to be the bad guys, and the Beatles were the good guys, all through Tavistock.
Yes, that's right. So they had to have the good boys, the bad boys, and play them off each other. Everything's about polarity and duality. Good, bad, up, down. This is how it works in the occult circles. So I also believe, based upon my research, and this is stuff that I'm still working on, Vince, that the Beatles, even going back to, I'm going to pick on Paul McCartney, biological Paul McCartney, and John Lennon, were in possibly in mind control programs at a very early age. In other words, they were being groomed and brought along way before the Beatles were ever on somebody's radar. So, they were being brought along, they were being tutored and schooled. A lot of people don't realize, if I pick on Lennon as an example, John was very well versed in the esoteric and mysticism. A lot of people don't realize that. In memoirs, we have a drawing that John did of the Four Horsemen. How does a guy that we're told was a cut up in school, basically had a difficult time getting through school, where did he learn all that? Where did he and Paul McCartney learn to layer lyrics? Because all the Beatle lyrics are layered. Mm-hmm. In other words, they have this meaning at the top level, and then at the second level, it's like the book, it's a whole other meaning. So, and this got even stronger as time went on, when biological Paul died and Billy took over. The layering, in my opinion, of the lyrics became much more prominent. But the point I'm trying to make is that this is not something you learn on a weekend course. You have to be schooled in how to do these things. So if we take a look at John Lennon's family background, his father was basically not in the picture. His mother relationship, and then his Aunt Mimi, this was very choppy. Biological Paul McCartney lost his mother at 14 years old. And if you take a look and you look up his father, Jim McCartney, you're going to be hard pressed to find what that man really did for a living. So his background is very sketchy, and I will say very suspect. So in my view, something was going on there. And we have to remember that the same people who put the Beatles psyop in play are also the same people who are writing the narrative, who are writing the histories, that are ensuring that the books and the magazines and the newspapers and the radio stations toe the line. People will say to me, "Oh, but I read so-and-so's book, and that's not what he said." I said, well, one of two things is going on there. Either the person who wrote the book is on the payroll, the Tavistock payroll, or if they're not, then they're using source material that Tavistock has put out. Either way, you're not getting the full truth. Now, I'm not saying that these stories, these histories, don't have a thread of truth, because the best lies need a thread of truth in order to come across as palatable and believable. So anyway, so then we have, if I'm right about John and Paul, and I don't know about Ringo or George, I haven't done enough work in that area to really comment on it. And then, they wind up going to Germany. They're playing at the Cavern. We have pictures of Stuart Sutcliffe making Masonic hand gestures. This is going back to, 62, 63, 1961. This is very early on. So something is brewing, something is going on, but you're only going to see it if you look for it. And when you look for it, it will be there. That's the thing. All of this stuff is hidden in plain sight. People think it's like magic, that I come up with this stuff, or I'm looking at it. Where'd you find this? It's really not that hard. If you dig long enough, it's out there. It is out there. Mm-hmm. And it's just a matter of starting to connect dots and piece it together. So I do believe that the Beatles, from the onset, even when they were playing in Germany and in the Cavern, they were on Tavistock's radar. No doubt about it. Just like the Rolling Stones, by the way, and the Who.
Yeah.
And all the other bands that came out of the British invasion.
Well, Mike, let me ask you this again, going back to the book and going back to what Billy says. I believe it was in Hamburg, but Billy talks about, I think specifically Paul and John. I think it was those two, but he talks about them at that point, the Hamburg days, making a pact with the devil.
Yeah, 1962.
Now, is that a connection to Tavistock, or are those two different things?
It's all together, Vince. It's all intertwined. So when we talk about Tavistock, we talk about occultism, We talk about Crowley. All of this stuff is stitched together. You can look at it separately, but it all comes together. That's their world. The world of Tavistock, the world of occultism, the world of Thelema, which is Crowley's religion, all of that stuff. It all comes together at the end of the day. It's all connected. So yes, in the book, he says in 1962, biological Paul McCartney and John Lennon entered into a pact that was overseen by handlers and occultists, priests. And the ritual was performed. And once the ritual concluded, the priests and the handlers went back to report back that the ritual concluded properly. And at that ritual, what John and Paul said, or what they agreed to, was that they would give their lives for the success, the fame, and fortune of the Beatles. Now, they were very young men at the time. There's no question about it. So the question comes up, did they really know what it is they were getting themselves into? I've been asked that question. And my answer is, I don't know. I wasn't there. I didn't know these guys personally. But it's very, very possible that they did not understand what they were getting themselves into. In other words, they didn't understand how serious it was to engage in that kind of satanic ritual.
And, it's interesting, Mike, when you talk about that. And then when I read that and they basically say, there's going to be a sacrifice.
Yeah.
And then, it's funny, bro, because then when you look at these other bands, when you look at, The Who, and you look at, like AC/DC with Bon Scott, and you start looking at these bands and a band member dying of each. And that even led me to, the Janis Joplins, the Jim Morrisons, the Jimi Hendrix dying at 27.
Right. The 27 Club.
Yeah, exactly. Is that the deal with the devil? And is that the sacrifice you make for the stardom and, the money and the glory and the fame? You in turn are giving your life, because, man, when you look at that stuff, it is very, very coincidental.
Yeah, that ritual is referred to as the crossroads, going to the crossroads. And it was Dylan that had an interview with, I think, 60 Minutes with Ed Bradley, going back, I believe it was the early 2000s, where Bob really spilled the beans, because Ed Bradley was asking him, how is it that he's able to continue to go on and doing this as long as he has been doing it? And I'm going to paraphrase here, but Dylan had said, look, I have an agreement with the chief commander. And Ed Bradley said, the chief commander? Who's the chief commander? And Dylan responds, well, he's the main man in this world, next world, in the unseen world, I think is what Bob said. So, the first noteworthy story of somebody going to the crossroads was Robert Johnson, who was a blues guitar player, right? But he really wasn't well known. There's also a theory or a notion that Bob Dylan did the same thing, that Dylan went to the crossroads. So, we have those situations, these young deaths, right? We have, like you said, the 27 Club, Kurt Cobain, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin. And then people don't really think about, what about John Bonham of Led Zeppelin? Mm-hmm. How about Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones? Freddie Mercury of Queen? And people will say, well, Mike, Freddie died from AIDS. I don't see how you think that's a ritual. What you have to understand is that the ritual is not, they put you on an altar and then they drive a stake through your heart.
Right.
Mm-hmm. It comes across it like an accident, but it's an accident that comes before your time is supposed to be up. Because when you go to the crossroads, what you're really asking for is, you're really asking Lucifer / Satan to rewrite your life script. That's what you're asking for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So Lucifer or Satan or whoever the chief commander is going to say, okay, well, I can rewrite your script if you want, but it's going to cost you.
Yeah. And it's almost like when you look at the deaths of all those people you mentioned, it was almost like they were killed by their own demons. Yeah. Freddie Mercury living that lifestyle, you could look at that like it was demon. You didn't even mention Amy Winehouse.
Right, Amy Winehouse.
Bon Scott.
Yep.
I mean, the list goes on and on. Their demons is kind of what did them in. Mike, I guess the next point, man, we have time to do this, right, Mike?
Yeah, you just keep going, Vince.
Okay, I guess the next point, this is, okay, so Tavistock, Mike told me about Tavistock, and I was like, holy shit. Here's the next thing Mike told me about, and like I said, bro, the 28 if and all this bullshit, like, bro, please, the McCartney dreams.
Yeah.
Would that be the next point? Should we go to that next, or am I missing something in the middle?
No, so we had the ritual, and then so the ritual in 62 with Paul and John participating meant that Paul had 4 years of runway. That's it. And so I'm believing that these nightmares and these dreams that he was having, recurring nightmares and dreams about his own death, were the result of having that ritual. So he was being haunted. He knew his time was up. He knew he was closing in, right? At some point, wheels have to go up on the plane.
Right.
And he knew it.
But it wasn't even the dreams of his own death. It was the dreams of his own death and being replaced.
Yes, and being replaced. Exactly. That's right. And being replaced.
And during that time, Mike, he actually met Billy Shepherd.
Yeah, he did. He met Billy back actually in 1962. He was actually introduced to Billy by Denny Lane.
Mm-hmm.
So Denny Lane is up to his eyeballs at this thing. I had somebody comment on my YouTube channel just today and said, "Do you think Denny Lane knows about this?" I'm like, yeah. Denny Lane knows all about this.
Yeah.
So so when Billy played with the Diplomats consisted of Billy, Denny Lane, Bev Bevan from ELO.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, we've got some heavy hitters in this band. The interesting thing with the Diplomats, if I could just for a second, is they were fairly big back in the day, back in England. But then they just closed up shop. They did record an album. It's locked in a vault someplace. It hasn't been released yet. Billy in Memoirs mentions that maybe someday they will release those tracks, or they will release that album. We'll have to wait and see. But yes, so Billy and the Beatles go back to 1962, and Biological Paul knew Billy, and Billy knew Biological Paul. Now, I don't know whether, they were going out and having beers together, but they certainly were acquainted.
Okay, now, Mike, I want you to verify this fact, and I'm trying to walk everybody through this because I want you to have a thorough understanding. Because Mike, I'm sick of people telling me I'm out of my freaking mind.
Yeah,
it's very logical, Mike. I got this from somebody else. I don't remember who. I watched these videos when they come on my YouTube. Now, somebody, and they showed stills of this. That while this is going on, 62, Beatles, Ed Sullivan, New York, Shea Stadium, that the Beatles have like a fan club.
Yep.
And that one of the people who wrote a good deal of the copy for the fan club was Billy Shears. Is that true?
Yeah, Billy Shepherd. Yeah.
Billy Shepherd. Now, again, guys, logic. Once 66 came along, did that Billy Shepherd disappear off the face of the planet to never be heard from again?
Yeah, that's something I get asked too, Vince. I get that question. Well, whatever happened to this guy, Billy Shepherd? So let me just say, first of all, we're going to refer to Billy with 3 different names that get bantered around. Billy Shears, obviously, because that's how he introduced himself on Sgt. Pepper.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Billy Shepherd, which is the name he uses in the Memoirs of Billy Shears, and then the long-standing surname of Campbell, Billy Campbell, that's been bantered around for a long time. So like I said, I don't get hung up on the last name. But yeah, it's interesting with the fan club articles and stuff like that. I think it's possible, Vince, that it wasn't the Billy we know today that was writing those articles. I believe it's very possible, like I said, because Tavistock has put this all together. It's a massive psychological operation. It's massive. And they could easily have had anybody on the staff involved in the operation, write the articles, and just stamp Billy Shepherd on it, knowing that in the future, it's going to be used as some point of reference or some point for research. This is what they do. We have to understand that with these psychological operations, what they don't do is they don't live in the moment. Things are planned and strategized for years and decades out. So they will plant information knowing that 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, it could be a source of some researcher or somebody to go chase something down a rabbit hole. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. No, without a shadow of a doubt. Now, Mike, again, I want to stay in order,
Yep.
and I don't want to jump over anything, but we can't go past the diplomats. And you did not mention him, Phil Ackrell.
Phil Ackrell. Yep.
Okay. Now, again, this is where I really tried to break this down and process this. And this is where it gets confusing to me. On that day, September 11th, 1966, does Phil Ackrell disappear?
Yeah. So now what happened with Phil Ackrell? So let me just back up for the audience. I said, we have this band, The Diplomats, which most people listening to this are not going to know anything about.
But you can go online. You can read all. I did it last night.
Yeah.
You can go online, read all about their history. They existed.
They existed. They absolutely existed. And there was a guy in the band by the name of Phil Ackrell. That guy is Billy. Okay. So the Diplomats were an early iteration of a band in which Billy was getting his chops down, working with Denny Lane, Bev Bevan. Okay. So he played a character called Phil Ackrell. Phil Ackrell is not a real person. He's a character. In memoirs, Billy explains that he leased or rented the name to a gentleman by the name of Phil Ralston later on, who picked up the part. So I get sent videos from a Phil Ackrell playing at these small venues in the 1980s and the 1990s, and people wanting to argue with me saying, see, there he is, because there's a caption under the guy's name, Phil Ackrell. No, that's somebody playing the character of Phil Ackrell. Ackrell, like Stanshall, we'll get to Vivian Stanshall, is a character. It's like Tom Cruise plays a character on TV or in the movies. It doesn't mean that character on the TV or the movies is real. Tom Cruise is depicting that person, playing that character. So that's what Billy was doing. Billy, he has a lot of different names he uses. He likes aliases. Apollo C. Vermouth, Percy Thrillington, Billy Martin. He used the name Billy Martin in order to record his first solo album to kind of keep it under the radar. So he's very much into this, into playing different personalities, different characters, using aliases, and Phil Ackrell was one of those characters and aliases.
When you look at, come on, we're going to get into this a little later because I want to stay in order. But, Mike, one thing you did turn me on to big time, I knew nothing about Vivian Stanshall and Bonzo Doodah Dog Band. I knew nothing about, so I started watching video. Bro, there is no doubt about it. Vivian Stanshall was a entertainer and loved to be a character and do crazy things. So if you watch Vivian Stanshall and see who this man was, I bought a ton of the albums. Listen to the records. This guy was an entertainer. So for him to play various roles is very, very feasible. And also, Mike, when we look at Phil Ackrell, now we get the Denny Lane connection, and we can fast forward to Wings when the Beatles departed.
Absolutely. When he formed Wings, when the Beatles broke up, he just called back his old buddy. They re-teamed up.
And we know that interview with Denny Lane.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. You want to explain that while we're on the subject so people can connect the dots? Because I know we'll forget about it later.
Okay, so there's two situations. The first one is an interview that he did on another YouTube channel. It's not mine. And he did a show and he went backstage and the guy was interviewing him. And the guy says to him, look, if you don't want to answer this question, I understand. So Denny's like, go ahead, ask whatever question you want to ask. So he says, what was it like to play with Billy Shepherd? And so Denny says, Billy Shepherd, you mean Billy Shears. And so they banter back and forth a little bit. And but during that 1 minute dialogue, it was about a minute, the thing that Denny Lane never said, or the name he never mentioned, was Paul McCartney.
Right.
He didn't say when the interviewer asked him what was it like to play with Billy Shepherd, then he didn't say Billy Shepherd. Who's that? You mean Paul McCartney? No, he said Billy Shears.
Right.
Then he
Right.
never mentions Paul McCartney's name, right? And so, and I think at the end of it, he says, "Well, who the hell is Billy Campbell anyway?" So
Yeah.
because the interviewer had said, "Oh, Billy Shears Campbell," so the interviewer was kind of jumping to conclusions. And then if you watch that clip, Denny has this little smirk on his face. It's the duper's delight kind of smile, right? He
Yeah.
knows he's pulling this guy in. Denny's having a little bit of fun. And at the end, he says, "Well, who the hell is Billy Campbell anyway?"
Yeah.
So what Denny was telling us is that we've got this guy. He's not Paul McCartney because I didn't say it was Paul McCartney. I told you he was Billy Shears.
Right. Right.
And you have to understand this is a technique called masterfully speaking that the Masons this is a technique that they use to speak. They can tell a ton of truth by masterfully speaking. And basically what it is an encoded way of talking. It's basically what is it that you didn't say? Right?
And we clearly see this. We'll talk about this later, but the
Yep.
perfect example of this is Letterman.
Yes. Oh, the Letterman interview.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that. I
Yep.
want to stay in time.
Okay.
But yeah, perfect example of that, Mike.
Yeah. The other one was a good friend of mine, Walt. He works at concert venues, and Walt and I did an interview, I guess about 9 to 12 months ago. And he had emailed me beforehand. He goes, "Hey, Mike, Denny's playing at a venue here where I live, and I'm going to be doing some of the backstage setup." He says, "I'm going to see if I can catch him because a lot of times we can catch the artists and we could talk to them a little bit." So he did. Denny was putting his guitars away and Walt was there. And Walt has a great personality, So he says, "Hey, Denny, tell me a little bit about Billy Shepherd." And so Denny did the same thing. He goes, Billy who?" And he goes, "Oh, you mean Billy McCartney." So there we go again with Denny not saying Paul McCartney and taking Billy's first name, merging it with McCartney. And again, it's what Denny's not saying. Denny's not saying, "Oh, I played with Paul McCartney."
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? He called him Billy McCartney. So anyway, the point being is that, like I said, these clues are all out there. You just have to take a step back, pause, and break it down and listen. You have to listen. Don't fill in the blanks. Right? Listen,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll come together.
Okay, so now let's get up to speed. Paul's having these horrific dreams that
Yep.
he's going to die, and he's letting his bandmates know it. The Beatles know it. He's having these dreams, horrific dreams. He's going to die, and he's going to be replaced, and he's letting them all know about it, and
Right.
it almost becomes an obsession with him, right, Mike?
Yes.
Am I missing anything there
Nope.
before we get to? Okay, then we get to September 11th. 1966, they're in the studio. There's an argument. Take it from there.
Yeah. So John wasn't there. He was in the studio, and I think John was in France. And the way the story goes, at least the way Memoirs tells it, is that Paul was given the song assignments for the next album, and he got agitated with Brian Epstein because of the number of songs that he was asked to crank out within a certain period of time. So he gets in the car. It's raining. He's driving down the road. There's a hitchhiker. The gal's name is Donna. That's where we get the song Lady Madonna. Maybe we can get to that a little bit. And then there's a car crash, and both of them die late at night, the day of September 11th, 1966. And so it took a little bit of time to be able to identify the bodies. Paul, the way the story goes, was decapitated, and he was very, very badly hurt and mangled in the accident. And so that was that. And so when it happened, there was then this this move very quickly to get a replacement in place. And so within, I think it's 5 days, they had Billy in front of John Lennon in France with Brian Epstein, banging through the terms and conditions in which Billy was going to take over the reins of the Beatles, because at that point, the band up to that point was pretty much John Lennon's band. When Billy took over, one of his requirements, his demands was that he have sole control of the Beatles' creative process. And so they had to get John to relinquish his role, his part in playing that role, and turn it over to Billy, which he did under duress, I should add.
Yeah, I want to stop before we get there, because see, to me, like that's one of my red flags that I want to talk about, but I want to back up a little bit. So he gets killed in a car crash. We all know about, you might want to tell people about Sailor Sam.
Yeah.
Because that's a hint that not too many people know about.
Okay, so Sam was a reporter. We're not told what newspaper he worked for, but he had figured out that there was a car accident and that Paul McCartney had died. So he was making phone calls to Brian Epstein to confirm the story. And to make a long story short, what happened was Epstein had become very agitated with him, and he was having difficulty shaking this guy, because this guy knew that Paul McCartney, biological Paul McCartney, did indeed pass away. So what they did was they paid him off, and they sent him on a little cruise. That was part of the payoff, a nice little vacation somewhere. So Billy writes about Sam in the song Band on the Run, Sailor Sam. Mm-hmm. So whenever you hear the lyric Sailor Sam in the song Band on the Run, Billy is referencing the reporter Sam, who at the time was going to go to press with the story that biological Paul McCartney was killed in a car crash. That's how that's the story. And so Sailor Sam and Band on the Run is that reporter.
Yeah. Now, Mike, I want to break down, because you said within 5 days, Billy's in front of, John with Brian, but I want to break down why the replacement, because there are a lot of things to look at. And one of the things, let me just go through the list of what I, got out of the book. Number one, the promise was made to Paul. Paul was convinced, I am going to die, and the promise was made that your legacy is going to continue. That's number one. Number two, this is what you hear all the time about the mass suicide. Oh my God, there was afraid the teenage girls, there was going to be a mass suicide. Number three was this Tavistock's plan to continue all along. These guys are getting hot, bro. We've got to get this thing going. Or because maybe this is where Paul's dad was involved, because Paul's dad kind of had to give it the blessing. Was this really all about dollars and cents? And this was a money-making, churning machine that they did not want to stop.
It's all of the above, Vince. So the way I approach this is, as I mentioned before, the pyramid of power, called the deep state, Tavistock, their planning is extremely in-depth. They don't leave anything to chance. So the way I look at this is that the whole thing, the pact that John and Paul made, the ritual, knowing that he was going to pass away in 1966, this was all known because of this ritual that they did. And if we back up before that, the whole grooming process I talked about before, right? So they're moving, when I say they, referring to Tavistock, to Deep State, they're moving this along. And so they knew that once they reached that point in 1966, they had to flip the switch, and it was going to be part two of their project plan, or phase two of their project plan. Phase two was the psychedelic era. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason for the rituals is because the rituals give their intent and their will. And again, when I say there, I mean the deep state, Tavistock, the occultists, the people that are involved in this, who are running the psychological operation. It gives their intent and will power to manifest. That's why they do these rituals. So now some people are going to say that's a bunch of bullshit. They won't believe it. I always tell folks, it doesn't matter what you believe. It matters what they believe, because they're running the show. Mm-hmm. You're not running the show. They're running the show. This is what they do. This is how they operate. This is what they believe. So phase one of the Beatles was the Beatles prior to becoming famous. That was the Beatles back at the Cavern back in Germany. Phase two of the Beatles were the Beatles that exploded onto the scene from 1962 through 1966 through Revolver. Please please me through Revolver.
Through when they stopped touring.
When they stopped touring, exactly.
Right.
So phase two was the recording and touring. Phase three was the Billy era. And I am thoroughly convinced, Vince, Billy coming into play was always part of the project plan. He was in the pipeline. So they didn't scurry. In other words, they didn't scurry around and say, oh, biological Paul McCartney was killed in a car crash. Who are we going to find that's going to fill his shoes?
Well, it's almost like we didn't even talk about this, Mike, but when you Billy Pepper and the Pepper Pots,
right?
Was that his practice?
Yes. Doing Beatle cover tunes.
Tell people about that.
All right. So, Billy also had this other band called Billy Pepper and the Pepper Pots. Of course, Billy Pepper, Sergeant Pepper. And they were Mercy Beat albums.
Yeah, they covered Beatles songs.
Beatles songs, right. Yeah. Half the albums were Beatle cover songs, and the other half, they were original compositions by himself and a guy by the last name of Frazier, who was a buddy of his. So, so we had, so that's a good point, Vince. So, you had the Diplomats, you had Billy Pepper and the Pepper Pots, you had all this stuff going on, so Billy wasn't just a Johnny-come-lately, somebody they yanked by the scruff of the neck and pulled in. He was in the pipeline.
And not only that, Mike, we didn't even add this. Like, not only was he in the pipeline, this was one of the greatest studio musicians in the game. I mean, he didn't learn this along the way. I mean, Billy Shepherd was a studio musician and great at his craft.
That's right. So Billy was formally trained in music, and we'll get into that too, because we could talk about the mind control program he was in as a kid and his tutoring by Aleister Crowley. We'll get into that. But Billy is very, very well versed in music. Read, write, and score music. Now, we were told the Beatle narrative is that none of the Beatles could read music. Well, none of the four original Beatles could read music, but Billy certainly can. So, when Billy came onto the scene, he teamed up immediately with George Martin, who was the Beatle producer. And, George, of course, was a highly skilled musician himself, along with being a producer. And by the way, Jane Asher, biological Paul's girlfriend, her mother was George's music teacher, just to make it a little weirder.
Yeah.
Okay. So Billy is, by trade, he's a wind instrument musician and a piano player.
Yeah. And we see that on the cover of Sgt. Pepper.
Sgt. Pepper, on the cover of Sgt. Pepper, folks, take out your album, brush it off, and take a look at all the instruments the Beatles are holding. Those are all of Billy's wind instruments. He plays those instruments. And in fact, if you go back to some of the old Vivian Stanshall performances with the Bonzo Band, he's playing those instruments. So Billy is, he's very skilled. Like I said, Tavistock, they're not leaving anything to chance. They're not just going to plop somebody in there and hope for the best. They put a ringer in there.
Yeah.
They made sure it was going to be a successful transition.
And let's look at logic again, guys. Let's look at logic again. If what everything Mike is saying is true, and Tavistock, created, the Beatles, wanting to mind control the young youth of America, bro, the last thing you're going to do is that band's going to stop touring. That's the last thing you're going to do, bro. You want that band on the road in every city, having an influence on the youth of America. All of a sudden, 1966, we stopped touring. And what does Billy Shears say about that? Mike, what is he, about 5 inches taller than Paul McCartney? That you can clearly see in pictures, unless he's wearing high heels in every picture. The before and the after, he is clearly taller than his bandmates. And Billy says That's the reason why we stopped touring. If you remember the early Beatles, bro, it used to be John with a mic and George and Paul used to share a mic. Bro, they would not be able to do that any longer because there was actually a height difference. Now, he could get cosmetic surgery, but bro, you're not going to cut, you're not going to cut 4 inches off the guy, Mike, right? So now, in their prime and wanting to get this message out, you stop touring?
Right. That's right. So Billy is at least 4 inches taller than biological Paul. Billy's 6'2", or at least in his prime, he was 6'2". He's going to be 82 years old this September. So when you get older, you lose a couple of inches. So we'll just say that he's around 6 foot. His current wife, Nancy Shevell, is 5 feet 10 inches. So when you see him walking with Nancy, he's taller than Nancy. So we know he's at least 6 feet tall. Mm-hmm. And with biological Paul, the numbers really, Vince, they shift around. Sometimes you'll see 5'9", 5'10", right, 5'11". They just keep moving around. But I think in memoirs, he says that he was about 4 inches taller than biological Paul. And you're correct. If he went on stage and he's standing next to George, people would look and say, well, he's a lot taller than George. I don't remember that. Yeah. What do you have, a growth spurt?
Yeah, and not only that, Mike, during the time, and I know you're going to know what I'm talking about. And guys, I have shown this on YouTube before. I'm going to get the link and put it up again. Bro, there's that black and white interview right after with Billy. It's in black and white. He's talking gibberish. He's constantly doing this, constantly trying to hide something. I don't know what that is on his head.
He's got a wig.
Can you tell people a little bit about, because bro, I got to tell you, Mike, when you go to Mike's website, Sage of Quay, guys, I'm telling you, when Mike puts the pictures side by side, it's ridiculous. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, this is not, he's got a long face, he's got a round face, he's got this. It's ridiculous. But that one interview, Mike, when I saw that interview, that was my, are you effing me moment. Yeah. I mean, I don't even know why they did that, because that interview right there would raise every question that anybody would have.
Yeah, they rolled it out because they had to start introducing him. And you see a very, very different Paul McCartney. You see a guy that is very aloof, eccentric. He was very much into the avant-garde scene in England at the time. And then you had biological Paul. He was a kid from Liverpool. And you see a very, very different personality emerge with that interview. And you're right, Vince. He's touching his face. He's kind of rambling on. He's got this wig on his head. He's got this piece on his head. You can clearly see.
No doubt.
No doubt.
Yeah. And so the question is, I mean, how do you not look at that and say, why is Paul McCartney wearing a wig?
Right.
And that's when he was going through the transition. I want to back up to the red flag now. Mike, are we cool with time and everything?
Yeah, Vince, go as long as you want.
This is awesome for me, man.
Yeah.
Here's my red flag. Not that this convinces me otherwise. Mike, especially after the Beatles went their separate ways, and we see John Lennon. And we see a strong John Lennon. We see him, speaking out against the war. We see the bet-in. I mean, bro, there are great interviews I have on DVD on, Dick Cavett. This is a guy that, bro, isn't afraid to say what's on his mind, to the point of, the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover was supposedly looking into him. This is a guy that spoke his mind. This is the one first problem I have where Epstein brings Billy to John. I think he's in France, right?
Yeah.
Seeing John's personality from like 1970 to, I believe he died in 81, those 10 years when you saw John Lennon and he was a rebel and he was a spokesman and he didn't care about consequences. He's kind of rolling here, Mike. And like he kind of agrees to give Billy control of the band. And as I'm reading this part, again, I'm not doubting what Billy is saying in this book, but I'm having a hard time. Like, bro, the success the Beatles had at that point and who John Lennon was at that point, he's rolling to a studio musician, more or less, and agreeing to give him control of the band. And bro, I know the circumstances were Paul just died. He's not in the right state of mind. He's shook. This is a shock to him. But the Lennon we see later on, it doesn't seem like he'd do something like this.
Yeah, I think at the time, Vince, I'm just hypothesizing here. It's possible that when John found out that biological Paul passed away, that maybe the reality of the ritual, the pact, and all that stuff hit him like a ton of bricks.
Ah, that's a good point, Mike.
Okay. So
Yes.
maybe the realization of what in God's name did we do?
And I better go along with this.
And I better go along with this. And, I'm not really going to have much of a say in this anyway, because he's got to be thinking to himself, this is probably all semantics at this point, because this guy is going to be the guy. So that's just a guess on my part.
And you know what, Mike? He could have been told just like that.
Yeah.
For all we know, Lennon could have been told just like that. John, this guy's going to be the guy, period, end of story.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. I think that's in Memoirs, if I recall. I don't know if it's in the Blue Book, maybe it was in the Red Book, but Billy tells us that John started to become paranoid at certain points because he started to wonder, well, gee, they replaced biological Paul McCartney. What's to say they couldn't replace me?
Right.
So they start to screw with their heads, Vince.
Right.
You start to think to yourself, okay, so you know what? I got to play ball here, because in all likelihood, if I don't, it's not going to turn out very well.
Yeah. Yeah.
That had to be what was running through his mind. I mean, even George Harrison in his home.
Yeah. The assassination attack.
Yeah. The guy broke in and he had the whole, all of his property was on lockdown with surveillance and everything else. This is how paranoid I think they had become after a certain point. Especially
and
after
that gets
Paul
back,
died.
Mike, and I just learned about this too, man. Like, guys, I'm just telling you, again, you can write every single one of these off to coincidence if you wanted. This blew my mind. I just picked it up the other day. John Lennon was killed by, was it David Wayne Chapman? What's his middle name?
David Chapman. Yeah.
But his middle name, I forget I think it's Wayne.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, we go back to Magical Mystery Tour. There is a plaque on the desk with David Chapman's initials.
Yeah.
The exact initials of what his name is. Again, coincidental, or was this is the guy that wound up killing John Lennon?
Yeah.
Billy says, and I've heard this all the time, Mike, about the Illuminati. Bro, they put the message right in your face. It's like, guys, here it is. We're telling you. Yeah. We're telling you, but you don't want to believe this, but we're telling you as clear as day. Guys, I was a Beatle fan at the time. Mike was a Beatle fan at the time. I believe the last album was Revolver, where you saw a little bit of a change. But now, bro, we are introduced to Sgt. Pepper. This is a new band. This is a new sound. This is a new look. And they are telling you, ladies and gentlemen, Billy Shears. They are telling you. They're making it as clear as day. Ladies and gentlemen, Billy Shears. But I got to tell you, Mike, you're into music. I'm into music. You're a musician, so you know a lot more about it than I do. Man, I don't know if there was any band in the history of music that within one album went through such a critical and crucial change in music. Bro, we're talking a couple of years ago, literally a couple of years ago, I Want to Hold Your Hand, and then we're doing A Day in a Life.
Right.
This came from somewhere.
Right. That's right. So, and by the way, it was Mark David Chapman, right?
Mark David, and that's the initials on the plaque on Magical Mystery Tour. Yeah. Mark David Chapman, yeah.
So, so the evolution of the Beatles is something that I have called out to try to put some context around how they developed. And so we have this band going back to 1962 doing songs like Love Me Do and Please Please Me and I Want to Hold Your Hand. And if we take a look at what Tavistock did, Vince, they very methodically and incrementally took the Beatles from this very, very boy band, rock and roll band. A lot of their stuff on the albums like Please Please Me, with the Beatles or Meet the Beatles there were a lot of cover tunes that they did, right?
Yep.
And then all of a sudden we see this, they're moving along and the music is getting more and more evolved and more complex. And it really hits a pinnacle where the change is very obvious with Rubber Soul.
Mm-hmm.
We have this very Dylan-esque styled album, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they move to Revolver, which is now the introduction into Eastern music and also into the psychedelic era. It's the intro into Sgt. Pepper with Tomorrow Never Knows, the John Lennon song. And then, boom, they come at Sgt. Pepper, and then it's like nothing we've ever seen before. Now, what Tavistock did with Pepper was they knew that in order to do this, they had to just overwhelm the senses of the people that were going to buy the album and listen to the Beatles. So they just put this brand new band up there. They didn't just try to dress up the guy playing Paul McCartney, Billy. They dressed everybody up in the band outfits. Right? The whole cover of Sgt. Pepper is a funeral scene. And we have this completely different sound now. The psychedelic era has been kicked off June 1st, 1967, when the Beatles released Sgt. Pepper. And by the way, that album is Billy's baby. That's Billy's concept. And the other Beatles, even if you listen to interviews, especially with John, he will say that, well, it was Paul's idea, it was Paul's concept, and we were basically brought in to kind of play along.
Right.
I'm paraphrasing here, but
yeah, the Beatles became the studio musicians.
Exactly. Right. We were there to support Paul or Billy to make his concept come to life. I also should mention too that this is related to Sgt. Pepper. Billy was behind. He was one of the main creators of bringing the Monterey Pop Festival together. Okay, one of the masterminds behind it, along with John Phillips of the Mamas and the Papas. And so the Monterey Pop Festival is considered the start of the Summer of Love, 1967, which is really the official start of the drug culture. And Billy, in memoirs, explains that he was working along with the CIA to get the distribution of LSD distributed at the Monterey Pop Festival. And local law enforcement was told to stand down, don't lock anybody up. So this was tops down, completely tops down, coming from the deep state, the CIA. This is what the Monterey Pop Festival is going to be all about. Kick off the psychedelic era, and we're going to do it by handing out LSD. And, Billy was involved in that, and he admits to it in memoirs. This is not something I'm making up. This is something he's telling us in the book. So we have the Monterey Pop Festival. That's when we really get to see Jimi Hendrix at the Monterey Pop Festival. And then, of course, going back to Sgt. Pepper, which is a landmark album. It's considered the psychedelic album of all time. And then with its little brother, Magical Mystery Tour, which followed, which had a lot of great songs on it too, but it was in Pepper's shadow.
Okay, Mike, here, maybe you could, this isn't something that you would know the answer to. This is really, I think, your just opinion and your feeling on this. Okay, biological Paul passed away. They replaced him with Billy Shears. Billy Shears is now running the band. There is a dramatic change in the Beatles.
Yep.
Okay, now we start with all the hints on the records. And the fascinating thing that Billy tells you is, bro, in the book, man, I swear to God, like, as I'm reading this book, I'm a writer, Mike, and I've written a couple of books. And I'm reading this book. I'm like, bro, this guy either has a magnificent imagination, which is out of this world, because how he could possibly make this up, I can't even comprehend. The beautiful thing about Billy is now he goes into, Mike, what did you call it when they play it backwards? Backtracking or
backmasking?
He goes into it. He explains it to you. This is how we did it. We did it that way. We put these messages in. Mike, here's something that puzzles me a little bit. Why? If they replace Paul McCartney, wouldn't you kind of want it to be like a thief in the night so the Tavistock plan goes on accordingly? Why would you all of a sudden, there's a funeral, there's the old Beatles, there's the new Beatles, Paul's back. Why? What was the purpose behind putting the hints out there?
Yeah, I think, Vince, I'll give you my opinion on this. I believe there are two reasons. The first reason is because the Illuminati subscribe to free will, what they refer to as free agency. Billy tells us this in the book. So in other words, what that means is we're going to give you the truth. We're going to tell you the truth. Now it's up to you to use your God-given gift of intellect and reasoning to figure it out. Either you pursue the truth or you make a decision that you're not, that you're going to continue to be deceived. And those that are deceived and stay in that space, they refer to as profane. So the Illuminati subscribe to free will and free agency, which means they must receive our consent in order to move things forward.
All right, guys, that was the end of my interview, part 1 with Mike Williams. Bro, we will be back next week. We will go deeper and deeper and deeper. We will peel back the onion, bro, and we will get to the truth. Paul McCartney or Billy Shears, bro? Who is walking around today, bro? We will get to that next week. Join me, bro. Don't miss it. See everybody next week. All right, Patreon supporters, this is your extended content in this part 1 interview between myself and Mike Williams of Sage of Quay. Bro, I told you, there is a mind-blowing interview that took place in 1967. Supposedly, this was the first public interview with Billy Shears. And what I'm going to do, bro, is I'm going to send you a link. And we're going to watch along a video where it's going back and forth between Biological Paul, 1966, and a year later, 1967, with who is supposed to be the same Paul. But is it Billy Shears? Totally different look, mannerisms, choice of words. I want you guys to watch this along with me and decide for yourself. Guys, I'm going to send you the link to this video. Once you cue it up, we are going to start about 19 seconds in. So I am going to hit play.
It's made it more hectic. It's made all the
Now, this is Biological Paul, bro, in 1966. One of the things you notice about Paul is, bro, very baby face-ish, very rounded face.
Except for the first show in Memphis, which was a bit down, but so what?
Even though everyone is sort of getting on very
now, bro,
well,
this is a year later.
It's a bit too controlled.
And this is what is fascinating to me. Paul seems to be talking just blubberish, bro. The face is very long. Do you see the difference, bro? This is a year apart. This ain't a few years apart. This is a year apart. Here in this shot, bro, that is clearly Paul's hair. You could see the rounded face, bro, the baby face.
I said, well, yes, but you're not allowed to do that. He said, well, you know, if
look at this, bro. Just the language is different. The covering up the face with the hand, the longer face, bro. And bro, that is a wig, bro. That is not real hair. That is a wig.
And it's just not true anymore. You know, they don't work, all those rules.
Because there's this thing about, when America gets violent, gets very
I mean, bro, like, you know, we can write this off to cosmetic surgery. But then you got to ask yourself the question, why? Why is Paul getting cosmetic surgery in 66? Bro, Paul would have been about 24 years old. Good-looking guy. Why is he getting cosmetic surgery? Why is he wearing a wig? Why has the shape of his face changed dramatically, bro?
You know, it's just a straightforward endeavor kind of thing, just to do something.
I mean, my gosh, bro, the thing that always catches me when you go back and forth is just the difference in the face.
See, we're not, when we say anything like that, we don't say it as older people seem to think to be offensive. We mean it helpfully, you know, and if it's wrong, what we say, okay, it's wrong, and people can say, you know, you're wrong about that one. But in many cases, we believe it's right, you know, we're quite serious about it.
Bro, notice the part in the hair is even different. In 1966, Paul, the part in his hair is completely on the other side of his head.
But it's that they're talking about things that are a bit new. They're talking about things which people don't.
I mean, that mustache looks fake,
But
bro.
do you mind being asked questions? For example, in America, people keep asking questions about Vietnam. Does this seem useful?
Well, I don't know, you know, if you can say that war's no good and a few people believe you, then it may be good, I don't know. You can't say too much though, that's the trouble.
And so
Wow. I'm telling you guys, every time I see this, I say all the time, we can write this off to plastic surgery, but why? Why would a young Paul McCartney, bro, at 24 years old, get his entire face reconstructed? It just doesn't make any sense to me, bro.
You know, freak out music and all that.
Don't immediately take it as that, you know, because your first reaction is going to be one of fear, you know.
Look at that, bro. Look at when you put these side by side, long face, round. I'm telling you, bro, the one on the left is a wig. They say the lips are different here. I don't see too much of a difference. I see a little different. You see a thinner lip on the left, bro. Yeah, I mean, the eyes do look different. He looks more wide-eyed in the younger shot. Man, that's fascinating, bro. Just the shape of the face, the shape of the nose. Yeah, so these are the things, bro, that you have to look at. And you have to have an open mind to stuff like this, bro. You know, difference in the way they sit. I don't buy that, bro. I mean, there are a lot of times where I really sit differently. So I don't know how much I really buy into that. It's really just the structure of the face that is just unbelievable to me. Yeah, 1 year apart, bro. So that is it, guys. That is one of the that interview always blows me away because there is clearly a difference. There is clearly a physical difference from 1966 to 1967. Guys, next week, man, part 2, Mike Williams. Guys, please join me. It's going to be interesting as hell. Mike is brilliant. He has made this his life for the last 3 years. I hope you are enjoying this, bro. And again, personally, bro, I want to thank you, man, for being a member of Patreon. Take care, everybody.
Number 9, number 9, number 9, number 9, number 9.
Good day, everybody. Welcome. This is Vince Russo, and I am about to play part 2 of my Paul McCartney conspiracy with the great Mike Williams of Sage of Quay. Did Paul McCartney indeed die in a car crash September 11th, 1966, only to be replaced by a replacement, a body double, so to speak, Billy Shears? We all know about Billy Shears, Sergeant Pepper. Guys, this is riveting to me. I have been following this story since I am a kid. Michael Williams is a genius. He has dedicated 3 years of his life to this. Mike doesn't have an ego. Mike doesn't have an agenda, bro. Mike is just presenting facts to a very interesting case. And I want to talk about that for a second, bro, before I start part 2 of the interview. Bro, you know, I've got a lot of mud slung my way after the first part of this interview. Vince, what are you talking about? Vince, you're gullible. Vince, you're a jackass. Vince, you're this. Vince, you're that. You know, guys, not for anything, bro. Open your mind. Because let me tell you something, bro. If you think that everything is the way it seems, you are out of your mind. How do I know, bro? Because I worked at the WWE. I knew what was really going on backstage. I knew certain things that have never made it to the public, bro. But what do you know? Oh, WWE, great wrestling company, Vince McMahon, genius promoter, yada, yada, yada. As my good friend Bruce Mitchell would say, blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, bro, you got no idea. You got no idea. So, bro, this case of Paul McCartney, bro, this is 50 years strong. Okay, if something's going on for 50 years, I don't care what it is, it has to have legs. So here I am, here Mike is. We are just providing you with some information and facts. Quite frankly, bro, I don't give a horse's ass whether you agree with me or not. It is unimportant to me, bro. It doesn't matter, and I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you of anything, bro. I am convinced that something really wrong is going on here, but that's me, bro. If you don't, that's cool. But like I said, people, don't be freaking gullible. There are a lot going on in this world, bro, that we have no clue about. We are not privy to. We all live in our little safe bubble, and we want it to remain safe. We want Paul McCartney to remain, one of the 4 Beatles, to, the icon, the legend. We don't want anything to change that, bro. But there's always the what if. And that's all Mike is presenting here today. Before we bring Mike back, I want to give a shout out, bro, to those who join the Patreon program, bro. Guys, without you, we can't do this. We need your support. And I want to thank right now Chloe McLeod, Mark Martucci, bro, little Paisan action there. Wesley Landon Woolsey, a.k.a. Mr. Woos. I know all about Mr. Woos from Twitch. I see him all the time. And, of course, Robert Braverman, who I know has been following the brand for a long time. Thank you guys so much for supporting Jeff and I on Patreon. All right, everybody, without further ado, here is the great Mike Williams, and here is the second part of the interview. Is Paul McCartney dead? Enjoy, everybody. If they replace Paul McCartney, wouldn't you kind of want it to be like a thief in the night, so the Tavistock plan goes on accordingly? Why would you all of a sudden, there's a funeral, there's the old Beatles, there's the new Beatles, Paul's back. Why? What was the purpose behind putting the hints out there?
Yeah, I think, Vince, I'll give you my opinion on this. I believe there are 2 reasons. The first reason is because the Illuminati subscribe to free will, what they refer to as free agency. Billy tells us this in the book. So in other words, what that means is we're going to give you the truth. We're going to tell you the truth. Now it's up to you to use your God-given gift of intellect and reasoning to figure it out. Either you pursue the truth or you make a decision that you're not, that you're going to continue to be deceived. And those that are deceived and stay in that space, they refer to as profane. So the Illuminati subscribe to free will and free agency, which means they must receive our consent in order to move things forward. So consent can mean that you just ignore it.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, we told them they don't want to listen.
Right. I told you. And so all these clues in the songs are telling us Paul is dead. Paul is dead. Paul is dead. And people are just blowing right past it. I was guilty of it myself, you know? So that's the first thing. So in other words, those clues are about consent, that they can continue, that Billy can continue to plow along doing what he's doing because he has agreement from the masses to continue on as Paul McCartney. The second piece of it is a bit darker. I also believe that the reason why the clues are there is because it continues the ritual. It's a ritual. So every time you listen to a Beatles song and you have backmasking and you have clues and you're singing along and you're focused on that song, you are focusing your consciousness and your attention on the ritual. It's like, think of it as engaging in some kind of mantra or some kind of chant. George Harrison admitted to this in the song, My Sweet Lord. At the end of it, he's singing about Krishna.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And George said the reason why he did that was because people would sing along.
Mm.
And that singing along creates the magic. The magic we're talking about is Crowley called it magic with a K. That magic is not somebody pulling a rabbit out of a hat or, showing you a card trick. This magic is about manipulating reality. It's about manipulating consciousness and steering the mass consciousness in a certain direction in order to achieve goals and objectives. It's called their will. This is why Crowley called it do as thou wilt. And this is the basis of Thelema. And this comes from Crowley's book, The Book of the Law. And this is what the Illuminati subscribe to. And so the entire world is locked up in this, and they don't even know it. So when you go to a show or you're buying records and you're worshiping rock stars and entertainers and celebrities, what you're really doing is you're worshiping your gods. They are consider them the demigods, and you're worshiping them. You're giving them your money, right? Money is what they call money, currency. It's a current. It's like electricity. It goes from you to them. In order for you to make that money, you have to exert energy to go to work and make that money. And then what do? You then take your hard-earned money and you give it to them.
Yeah. Man, you know what's fascinating about that, Mike? When you lay it out that way, and again, listen, Mike.
It's the same thing with wrestling, Vince. It's the same thing.
Yeah, people are going to watch this show and say we're both nuts. I'm going to get back to logic again.
Okay.
Because what you just said, I never thought of, I never looked at. But here's my question while I'm reading this book. Bro, every single song has messages in it, bro. Obla di, obla da. Every song, bro. Every freaking song. Bro, not only that, Donovan.
Yes.
Wrote about it. The Rolling Stones wrote about it. Elton John and Bernie Taupin wrote about it. So I'm sitting here, I'm saying, wait a minute. Now I'm confused because this is supposed to be a secret, but yet they're all writing about it. And like I'm saying to myself, bro, you think it would come to a point where, okay, bro, enough. You know what I'm saying? Bro, there were death clues in Egypt Station.
Right.
So it has gone on from 1966 to today. And I think it's exactly what it is. It's the subliminal.
Yes.
It's the getting that message across over and over and over again, because why else would you do it?
Yeah, it's repetition. It's repetition, and it becomes part of your psyche. And don't forget the Who.
Yeah, right, exactly.
The song Won't Get Fooled Again, Billy tells us, is a Paul is Dead song. The new boss, same as the old boss. The new Paul, same as the old Paul. That's how it's to be interpreted. And what they did with the Beatle lyrics is a lot of times they switched he and she to kind of camouflage,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Remember, it's layered, right? So the first
yeah.
layer you're thinking he, she, but then they would just manipulate the he, she, he, and that's how they were layering the songs. And you're right. I mean, if you look at memoirs in the back of the book, I have it here. This unbelievable number of songs that Billy takes us through in the book, and it's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling.
It's mind-boggling. It's every song, man. Every song.
Yeah, every song. And the one thing I want to add, Vince, a lot of people who want to say that the book is fiction and all this stuff. One of the things that you have to understand is in order for those lyrics to be in the book, Tom Harriet had to receive permission from those artists to put those songs and the lyrics in the book. So he had to receive permission from Paul McCartney, Billy. He had to receive permission from biological Pauls, whoever's managing his estate, Elton John, the Rolling Stones, Donovan, The Who. So otherwise, he would be up to his eyeballs in lawsuits. Okay.
And it's funny too, Mike, because I'm reading this book and I'm just like, bro, like they keep letting more and more people in on it. Bro, I knew about the Stones and the Who and Donovan and all that shit. I did not know about Elton John and Bernie Taupin. So like, as I'm reading this book, I'm like, why in God's name would you keep letting people in on this? Because somebody's going to spill the beans. But the fact of the matter is, bro, they're all at that level.
Yes.
So like, bro, if you spill the beans, there's going to be consequences.
Yes, that's right, Vince. So it's a big club, as George Carlin said, and we ain't in it. And so all of these guys are in the club, which means they all operate within that pyramid of power I spoke about. That's the thing. It's almost sad in a way, right? You have a lot of musicians and entertainers and people who want to be actors and actresses, and what they don't understand is it's a club. So all this stuff where they tell you, oh, you can make it big, you could be great, you could be this, you could be that. Well, you can, but you're going to have to sell a piece of your soul each step of the way. And the higher you want to climb up that ladder, the more of your soul is going to have to be sold. And many of these guys, when we talk about Denny Lane, we talk about Billy, we talk about Mick Jagger, we talk about Jimmy Page, all of these guys are like card-carrying members of the pyramid of power, right? They did not obtain the opportunities that they received and the fame and fortune that they received because they just happened to have a lot of luck. Okay. Yes, they had to be very good at what they did, and there is a competition. They operate like a corporation. This is how the pyramid operates. Within a corporation, opportunities arise, and people within the corporation have to compete for those positions to get promoted and so on. Works the same way. I asked this to a very high-level Freemason. I said, I've deducted that the Masonic structure operates like a corporation. Am I right or wrong? He says, you're correct. That's exactly how it works. So they do have to compete. But the thing is, as they secure these opportunities and they move up each step of the ladder, more and more power, more and more benefits, more fame and fortune and wealth comes their way. And that's how it works,
The one question like I kept asking, and again, when you talk about, the more you talk about Billy, the more you talk about like the more I believe like this is almost like something out of this world. And because I'll tell you, one of the things, like as I'm reading this and I'm going through these pages, it's not that I'm going back and forth in believing. It's not that, but I'm going back and forth in my questions. I'll give you a perfect example, Mike. My heyday in wrestling was 1999. Wrestling at that point, it was called the Attitude Era. Bro, the world was watching wrestling. I was writing it. Okay? Huge boom period. To this day, Mike, I'm 58. People will ask me questions from 20 years ago. Vince, why did you book this match? Why did you do this? And I'm like, bro, I can't remember. Like, honestly, I can't remember. So when I know I'm constantly being asked things from 20 years ago and I'm only 58 and bro, I can't remember. And then 2009. Okay, bro. So do the math. This original book was written when he was 72 years old. So that's what's blowing me away because I'm saying, okay, bro, a 72-year-old man wrote this. how did he remember all that shit? Like, bro, every detail of every song and every line. And B, if he's making it up, this 72-year-old man has an extraordinary mind. Like, what is it, bro? I can't imagine I'm 58, bro. I can't imagine 70. You know who Vince McMahon is, right?
Yes.
Mike, Vince McMahon just turned 72. He's lost his marbles. Like, you look at the things he does now. He used to be a genius. I'll be honest with you, bro. At 72, he's an idiot savant. I mean, seriously, the guy's an idiot. So I'm saying to myself, okay, bro, either a 72-year-old is making this brilliant shit up, or he's got a memory that's photographic, or I don't know, did he keep a log? What's your opinion of that?
Okay, so I can answer this question, believe it or not. First of all, Billy is still fully functioning. You know, when I went to go see him in concert, his voice is shot, yes, but physically, his mobility on stage for a man that's going to be 82 in September was unbelievable. I have parents who are a year or two older than him, and I'm going to tell you right now, Vince, there is absolutely no way they would last 4 minutes on that stage.
Right,
okay?
right.
And he's doing 2.5-hour shows. The concert tour, I think, is 39 dates within a year, and he's going to be 82 years old. So, so something's going on there. But I'm going to take you through something I stumbled on that I figured out based upon a correspondence that I had with the author Thomas Hugh Harriot. So I had a question for Tom, and occasionally I'll email him, and Tom and I have a good relationship these days. It's a professional relationship. He enjoys what I put out. I enjoy the books, and
so do you really know anything about him beyond the surface, or do you kind of keep it on the surface? Do you know about him?
I don't know anything about Tom in depth. I can tell you that he was a Mormon. He left the Mormon Church back in 2009. Of course, Mormonism was created by Freemasonry. He is a Freemason, and if I had to guess, he is either a 32nd or 33rd degree Mason. Tom did tell me that his ability to encode was a skill that was taught to him years ago. And at the time when he was taught it, he had no idea why. He just was taught how to do encoding. So remember before I was telling you that when I say they, the Deep State, Tavistock, the Masons, they strategize, years and decades ahead, right? I mean, they're always planning ahead. So Tom was trained in this ability to be able to encode. So that's all I know about Tom, other than the fact that he has been extremely gracious whenever I've contacted him. He has signed non-disclosures, obviously, and confidentiality agreements in order to do the book. So he will write to me if I have questions. He will tell me what he can. He has been very open where he can be, but there's other times when he cannot talk about certain things. And I understand that, so I don't press him. Now, one of the questions I asked him had to do with I think it had to do with Phil Ackrell, going back about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And Tom wrote me back and he said, Mike, I have to go back to the boxes and take a look and go through the files and see what was sent to me on that. Okay, so we now know he was sent a bunch of information. He was sent boxes with files. So that tells me Billy's life is extremely well documented. And I don't believe it's just Billy writing about himself. I don't think it's Billy writing a diary. Because Billy is in this system, and Billy is blue blood. Billy goes back to William Wallace.
Mm-hmm.
William Wallace, for those who don't know, he's the character that Mel Gibson played in Braveheart. Mm-hmm. So he is of Scottish descent. He goes back to William Wallace. The 28 if on the Volkswagen had nothing to do with Paul McCartney's age would have been. It has to do with the generations separating Billy from William Wallace. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the point being, Vince, is that Billy's life has been documented from the very beginning, which means He was slotted and being groomed to be in a position of influence and power at some point down the line. He was brought along. He was tapped. He was identified at a very early age. When that happens within this system, and this is a system that people who are listening to the show are thinking, this guy Mike is absolutely out of his mind, okay? I'm telling you, there's a whole other world out there that we're not privy to, that we do not operate in. There's two worlds. There's the world for those that live outside the pyramid, and there's the world that exists for the people inside the pyramid. Billy's inside the pyramid. He's documented, Vince, up the wazoo. Okay? And like I said, it's not because he was writing a diary. He may have a diary. I'm sure he does. But it goes way beyond that. So when Tom was tapped to write this book, when he was selected to write this book, all this stuff was sent to him. And that it was Tom's job to take these files, which I'm sure were not just thrown to him like a bunch of receipts, you go to the IRS with, right? These were very orderly, chronologically put together. And then Tom had the job of pulling it all together and then putting it into the book and encoding the book. 666 pages, 66 chapters, 66 footnotes. It's all occulted. So that is how that's how the book got written. Although I am told by Tom that Billy's not suffering from any kind of loss of memory, that he is still very focused on what he does. He's very focused on his business because McCartney is an enterprise. He's not just a guy that runs around writing songs. And I mean, that's what he does, but he's big business. He's an enterprise, and he's still sharp as a tack. That's what I'm told by Tom.
Okay. Let's follow up a little bit because I want you to get into this a little bit, Mike, because this is where it's hard for me to understand.
Yeah.
Has Billy ever been? I've never seen an interview, and I'm sure he has been. There has definitely been. We talked about the height. You want to tell me about the 5 or 6 toes quickly?
Yeah. So I was doing an interview with Tina Foster, and Tina's another researcher. She does great work. And during our discussion, she happened to mention that she was clued in a while back that Billy, or a version, I don't want to say Billy, a version of McCartney, because it's not just Billy. There are other characters filling in and playing the part over the timeline. Billy's the primary replacement, but there have been others. Has 6 toes. So I wrote it down and I said, wow, okay. So I went and I did some research, and lo and behold, I find versions of McCartney with his shoes off, and he has 6 toes.
And you've put those pictures up on Sage of Quay. You can see
Yes.
the pictures for yourself.
You can see them for yourself. I blew them up. I even have numbers. You can count the toes. But here's the thing. And people say, well, so what? He has 6 toes. Well, the so what part of it is this. Biological Paul, and I have pictures of his feet also, he had 5 toes. So either along the way he grew a 6th toe, or there's another person, at least one other person,
Right,
playing the part.
Yeah.
Okay. So that is a very, very key proof point as far as I'm concerned, Vince. The 5 toes versus the 6 toes. There's no way of getting around that one.
Mike, are you familiar with wrestling at all?
A little bit. Yeah.
Did you know a wrestler by the name of China?
Yes.
Okay, well, if you look at China earlier, I was very close with her, Mike. We were very, very good friends. But when she came in, she had like a very square, manly face. Okay, bro, they basically smashed her face and rebuilt it because she wanted more of a feminine look. Because she had a jetting jaw and very masculine. And she sent me the pictures. I mean, she was wrapped like the mummy. I mean, she had her face, broken and rebuilt. I mean, my God, bro, it is as clear as day. The younger Paul, the biological Paul, the round baby face. All of a sudden, bro, we got this long horse face. Has he ever been asked about cosmetic plastic surgery? Because I can't find anything where anybody has ever asked him that or he's addressed it.
Yeah, nobody will ask him that question because Billy Everything is vetted, Vince. He's been at a level for a very long time where, there's not going to be a lot of just people outside the inner circle that are going to get that close to him, especially to ask those types of questions. It's just not going to happen. In fact, I was trying to see if I would be able to meet him at the concert. Okay. I did actually put a feeler out to see if that would be possible. And the person that I contacted, and I'm not going to say who the person is, said, let me see, Mike, what we can do. He said, my initial take on it is that the answer is going to be no. He says, but we don't know with him sometimes because sometimes he'll make a decision that surprises us all. And so I ended up not seeing him. And I'm sure the reason for that was because I'm one of those people that are outside the inner circle. And I am one of those people that know that I shouldn't know because I'm outside the circle. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So it's like bringing an outsider into your home.
Right.
And then trusting that outsider to toe the line. So what they're not going to do is they're not going to have a situation where something could jeopardize the deception. So that's why I'm convinced that's why I was told, no, you're not going to be able to go see him.
You know what I was, what I saw that was interesting to me, Mike, and I find this hard to believe he's slipping up. Because I mean, from everything you've said in the boxes of, documentation that you, Harriet, received, there were two contradictions on a recent Stern interview from the book. And I'll tell you what those two contradictions were, because I just read the parts in the book today. Number one, obla di obla da. Stern said to him, man, I heard Lennon hated that song. And he said on the show, oh no, he liked it. And then he went on to tell the story that he's got in the book where he says, Lennon came in, sat at the piano, banged away that opening part. That was consistent. But in the book, he says Lennon hated the song.
Yeah.
And the second inconsistency, and this was a big one, man. The clips on YouTube where Stern asked him who broke up the Beatles. And he says John Lennon broke up the Beatles. I mean, it was John. In the book, he clearly states, I broke up the Beatles.
Yes.
And I found that interesting because, reading these details of every song in the documentation, it just seems like he would know these answers by heart. What do you, could that be the age factor?
I'm going to say, Vince, that I see Billy do this a lot. So what he does is he has two narratives. We have the one narrative that's in the memoirs of Billy Shears, and that's the narrative where he's telling you the truth. In fact, in the book, he even tells you that the version of the Beatles and Paul McCartney for public consumption is the fiction. And what I'm telling you here is the nonfiction. He even says that in the book, right? There's a sentence or two that explains that. So what he does is when he goes outside of the book, he continues to play the part of Paul McCartney, and he has different versions of these stories. There are times when he will overlap with something he said in the book, and then he just veers off, and it's different, like you just explained, right? You just illustrated. I believe that's intentional. I believe it's because Billy's take on this, it goes this way. Again, my opinion. You want to know about me? You want to know the truth? Read the book. If you're not going to read the book and you're going to continue to idolize a persona, a character, then I'm going to give you the fictional accounts of the character. And that's how I think, I believe he has two narratives and two threads that he rides. And
yeah, Mike,
that's the best way I can explain it.
That would make perfect sense because I always go back to who's going to take off their shoes to walk across red hot pavement?
Nobody.
I mean, like that, bro. When seriously, But before we talk about that interview, here's the thing this is really a hard pill to swallow. And I want to get into this a little bit because, bro, thanks to you, I've become a big fan of this character, Vivian Stanshall. What a freaking, but he would have been a great wrestler. What a personality. What, like, unbelievable. I've been watching a lot of Bonzo documentaries and, you know, them being on shows over there and stuff. What a, oh my God, what a charismatic individual. Okay. Magical Mystery Tour. Bonzo's in the movie.
Right.
Magical Mystery Tour. Paul's in the movie. Now, I've heard you say this, Mike. This is where, like, you say there are other Vivian Stanshalls.
Yes.
Correct. So that would have been a imposter Vivian Stanshall for that movie.
No. So I'll let me explain. I'll give you my theory on this. So I was contacted about a year and a half ago, Vince, by somebody who was very credible. And they had explained to me, I'm going to give you a little backstory here, so I hope you have the time.
Oh, absolutely. Please.
Okay. This person explained to me that back in the 1990s, they were at a very high level party, soiree, whatever you want to call it. It consisted of people from the intelligence business, people from technology, the military industrial intelligence industries. And during that get together where they were having discussions, there was a couple of guys that were off to the side. This is how it was explained to me. And this person was there. This is a first person account. And they explained that when they made the swap, the Paul McCartney swap, when Paul died, they created two primary replacements. One being the performer, the musician. That's Billy.
Right.
There was another version that was not a musician, but an actor who was used for public consumption. So he would walk the streets. He might do interviews. He'd be photographed. Okay. The way I understand it and the way I put it together is, and I call that version Street Paul. That's the name that was given to me. Right. They said he was referred to as Street Paul. So Street Paul, he was way ahead as far as the reconstructive surgery and the transformation to look like Paul McCartney. Billy was still in process, but Tavistock and the team there didn't worry about it because they said, well, Billy's going to be recording songs, and everybody who's going to be in the recording studio, the engineers and the producers, know who he is. No big deal. They're in on the secret. So, but we have Street Paul, and he can run cover. So people are going to see this guy that looks very much like Street Paul. In fact, in memoirs, they tell us at the Melody Maker Awards on September 13th, 1966, where Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr are up on stage and they're receiving an award, that's not biological Paul. That was Tavistock's best double. That's Street Paul. It's a mind blower because when I have the footage. When you watch it, it's just unbelievable what they did, how they were able to transform this guy to look exactly like biological Paul. So I believe what they did in Magical Mystery Tour was this. Scenes where we have close-ups and they're not performing, we are seeing Street Paul. Other scenes where there's a performance and the camera is further away, that's Billy in costume. The costume consisted of, they used a lot of latex, foam latex. Foam latex has been used extensively since The Wizard of Oz back in the 1930s. So by the time they got to 1966, it was 30 years of foam latex technology being used cosmetically for theater and movies and so on. A lot of people think like they invented latex last week. It's been in play for 90 years. Mm-hmm. So I believe in Magical Mystery Tour, we are seeing two replacements. We're seeing Street Paul, and then we're seeing Billy when there's the performances, like when they're singing I Am the Walrus, that scene. I believe that to be Billy.
Who's Vivian Stanshall?
Okay, so Stanshall is Billy. So when Stanshall comes out in Magical Mystery Tour, that's what he looks like without all of the latex and all the cosmetics.
So he made a cameo as himself, and then the rest of the time in the film, he was made up to look like Paul McCartney. And I believe, again, what they did was they played off of Street Paul and Billy. Because even when you look at Magical Mystery Tour, if you look at stills from the movie, if you look closely, you will see that the Paul McCartney in Magical Mystery Tour in different stills doesn't look exactly the same. They don't look the same. So
Because you're not looking for that.
You're not looking for it. See, what
Right.
they did was, which was
Right.
brilliant, was
Right.
they put him in the context of the Beatles. So what happens with people psychologically in the mind? They say, that's Paul McCartney.
Right.
You have no reason to question it.
Right.
But once you start analyzing it, so Magical Mystery Tour, Billy's in it. He does a cameo as Vivian Stanshall, and he's also playing the McCartney character, but not in the close-ups. In the close-ups, that's Street Paul, because Street Paul, like I said, was more advanced in the transformation. In fact, I don't even want to say more advanced. They nailed it with him. He was all set. He was ready to go.
Now, Mike, here's where you blew me a little. Here's where you blew me away a little, because here's where you made me believe that you're in on this thing, Mike. You tell us about Vivian Stanshall, who allegedly passed away, but Vivian Stanshall did not pass away. The year of his passing is the year he killed the character.
That's
correct?
Right. Yep, he killed the character. Right. Well, no. Well, Vivian's.
Go ahead. Explain this.
Okay. So let me explain. So the reason why I set it up with the two primary replacements with Paul McCartney, the reason why I did that was because, and a lot of people will say, Mike, you know more about this. You must be, you're in the inner circle. You're an agent or whatever doing this stuff. No, I got contacted by somebody. Now, I do not discount the fact that this person who told me the story about the two primary Paul replacements was not somebody that was sent from the inner circle to me as a source in order to get me to understand how it worked. You see what I'm saying, Vince?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So I put it together. I think I sent a version of that video, that presentation, which I put up in December of 2018. I sent it to Tom. I said, let me know what you think. He emailed me back and he said, I think you're going to like the new memoirs. Okay, so Memoirs was a pre-order on September 9th of 2018, but it didn't show up until after Christmas, right? There were delays in getting the book out. So I did not have the book when I sent Tom the presentation. When the book finally came out, the same exact template was used for Vivian Stanshall. 2 Vivian Stanshalls. There's one Vivian Stanshall who's Billy, who plays at the Bonzo Dog Band with Neil Innes. By the way, Neil Innes is the main protagonist of the parody Beatle band, the Ruddles.
Mm-hmm.
It's all tied together, okay? Monty Python, all of those guys, they're all kind of in on it. George Harrison was very connected into the Monty Python group.
Yeah.
So we've got Billy playing with the Bonzos, and what Billy did was he hired an actor/musician to play Vivian Stanshall. He hired this guy to be a lifetime actor. The reason why Billy did this was because the McCartney role was taking up a lot of time. And so he needed the McCartney character and the Stanshall character to coexist. So he hired this guy. This guy was on Billy's payroll. So this was the person, we'll call him Street Vivian or Street Viv. Yeah. This is the guy that was married to Kai Longfellow. This is the guy that had kids, and he had a dog by the name of Bones. I'll get into that in my next presentation a couple of months out. Think Skull and Bones, okay? So he put this guy in place. Then when Linda was diagnosed with cancer, Billy said, you know what? I'm just going to retire the character. That's what I'm going to do. So he approached the guy that was on his payroll, the actor playing the part of Vivian Stanshall when Billy wasn't with the Bonzos. And by the way, if you take a close look, folks, at those 2 Stanshalls, I'm doing a collage right now, Vince, just like I did with McCartney. You're going to see there are different versions of Vivian Stanshall. They don't look alike. So there are different characters playing the role. So he went to Street Viv and said, look, I'm packing it up. Memoirs tells us on page 84 that the guy playing the character said, no, I'm not giving it up. This is my life. I've invested my life into being this character, Vivian Stanshall. I like doing it. I'm not giving it up.
Just like Billy had invested his life into being Paul McCartney.
Right.
Kind of the same thing.
So this guy said to Billy, no, I'm not doing that, which took Billy by surprise. And then, this is what happened. You guys, people listening, could read into this, make your own decisions. He dies in an electrical fire at the age of 51 in 1995. I don't know how many people, I don't know anybody who ever died in an electrical fire. I know people do, but it's very odd that Billy approaches this guy and says, look, I'm packing the character up. I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm going to retire the character. And this guy says, no, I'm not doing that. And then this guy disappears. Okay. Mm-hmm. I don't know. And people will say to me about this whole Stanshall piece in Memoirs being fiction. And I said, look, if it were a lie, if it were fiction, the Stanshall estate, he's got children, would sue Tom Harriet. Mm-hmm. They would sue him. Right?
Yeah.
As far as I know, there's no lawsuit. And the reason why is because, as Billy explains in the book, there were two of them. Billy and the actor he hired, the lifetime actor he hired that was on his payroll to play the part when Billy had to go run off and play McCartney. So you see the same template was used. Yeah. Performer, Billy McCartney, Street Paul. Then we have performer Stanshall with the Bonzos, Billy. And then we had Street Viv, who was an actor / musician, but not a musician like Billy was. You see, so the same template rolled out.
God, it blows your mind, Mike, because when you talk about how many instances is this being used in today that is right in front of our face? I'm a huge Rihanna mark. I mean, come on, man.
Right.
Like, I mean, how, you got to explain this to me, bro, because this freaked me out a little bit. The Vivian Stanshall messages on your recordings.
Yeah.
What do you, bro? Like that's what I thought. He's in on it, bro. Mike Williams is Vivian Stanshall. Bro, that literally freaked me out, bro. Like that literally freaked me out. What, please tell me how you did that.
It's a computerized voice.
Oh God, man. It was so freaking real. That gave me the heebie-jeebies, bro.
It's a software that I have. And what you have to do, Vince, is you have to just word things. You have to put the words together just right so it doesn't sound computerized.
Yeah.
And I've had so many people write me and say, that can't be him. He died. Right. And I'm laughing and I'm thinking to myself, it's not Vivian Stanshall, but, it's good for fun. I do it for laughs and to get a chuckle out of it.
You
But
freak me out. You didn't make me laugh. You freaked me out, Mike. Hey, Mike, let's turn this. This is where now, I told you a couple of the red flags, John just caving, but man, your explanation and your theory and your opinion of that, I buy it.
Yeah.
Vivian, Ackrell, I mean, bro, you have to have an open mind to believe all that. Bro. And again, I go back to the showman that Vivian Stanshall was.
Yeah.
This guy, guys, you got to see him. I mean, you know what's funny, Mike? I'm a huge Tiny Tim mark.
Okay.
Because Tiny Tim was so unique. That's why I like Vivian Stanshall. I mean, the same thing. But Mike, here's now where I start. Okay. I don't know if it's intentional or not. There are a couple of instances in this book. The more you get closer to the end, the more the real person, Billy Shear, starts to come out. And bro, I know, like, I started feeling emotional about it when, bro, and like, guys, let's look at this realistically. From the time Billy joined the band in 1966, bro, I don't think people realize the Beatles were done 3 years later. Yeah. So like, there was, whether either they didn't get along or, bro, they only had a 3-year run with Billy. But here's the first thing, Mike, where I started, my heart started opening up a little bit. He really starts talking about, and he doesn't hit you over the head with it. It's as he's telling the stories. They kind of start detesting him. Especially John Lennon, they start detesting him. They start making fun of him. With the obla da, Desmond, calling him right. Desmond and Boogaloo and all this stuff. And like all of a sudden, bro, he is a guy. I mean, you guys got to really wrap your head around this and think about this. Okay, bro? Here's a guy, bro, that's being, as far as Paul, Ringo, and George are concerned, this is not Paul. This is not their friend. This is a guy that came into the group, took over the group, 1,000 times more motivated than biological Paul, telling them what to do, producing them. I mean, this guy, Billy, really took control of the operation. Okay, bro? From what I'm reading, Paul, Ringo, John never really got over Paul's death. They never really got over it. And with Billy being this perfectionist, that I'm going to bring the Beatles to a new level and kind of taking charge and being the guys and telling them what to do, the combination of them really missing Paul and starting to detest Billy because of his drive. As you're reading the book, bro, he's starting to feel more and more like an outsider.
Yeah.
Now, guys, you got to understand, like, think about this for a second. If this book, The Memoirs of Billy Shears, is correct, Billy Shears exists. So this was a man who gave up his entire life. Billy Shears no longer existed, bro. Gave up his entire life to become Paul McCartney. Now, bro, of course, he even talks about it. There's fame, there's fortune, there's money, there's the sexual prowess. He can get any girl he wants. He talks about all this, but he's also now talking about, I gave up my life. Not even arguably, I brought the Beatles to the next level. Me, I did that. I gave up my identity. I gave up my family. I gave up my life. And these guys are ridiculing me. These guys are making fun of me. These guys are detesting me. And, bro, he makes it clear, and I believe him. The money, the wealth, the fame, the fortune, I don't think that meant absolutely anything to him. I think, bro, for Billy Shepherd, this was his dream job. I mean, bro, if you're going to give up your identity, this better be the dream job. But, man, this was the first instance in the book, Mike, where I really started feeling for Billy Shears as a human being. I'm going to get to part 2 later, which was 10 times as worse. But this is where now you start, holy shit, like, this is a different guy. And this guy gave up an entire life, everything he had built before it, family, friends. And this is the treatment he's getting. And bro, of course, I'm immediately, Mike, I'm brought to the scene in Let It Be.
Yeah.
Where Harrison, like, bro, I'll do whatever you want me. When you're reading this and you're looking at that scene, it's like, bro, this ain't the guy they started with in 1962.
No, that's a very telling scene in Let It Be.
Yeah. So, Mike, did you just really? I felt Billy coming out more and more as the book went on.
Yeah. So Billy, he makes no bones about it that he took the Beatles to a level that he believes, at least he believes, would never have achieved. They would never have achieved. he believes the Beatles.
Mike makes no bones about it. He was better than biological Paul. Makes no bones. Says it numerous times.
Yes, more talented, more of a skilled musician, and so on. He definitely says that. And the Beatles would have ended in 1966 if it wasn't for him taking the reins. Plain and simple. So what happened was, Vince, and you explained it great. I mean, the Beatles, before he showed up, basically they were 4 friends. Now they had a boss. And they had a guy that was a workaholic and a perfectionist. And in fact, in the book, he tells us that during the recording of Pepper, that he actually went back and redid tracks that the other Beatles had put down because he didn't like the way they played and he didn't like the way it sounded. So he says he was in that studio late at night, midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., working on Pepper, day in and day out. I believe it was 9 months worth of time. And, if we think about all the McCartney songs as a Beatle from 1967 through 1970 that people enjoy, that's Billy. And Billy drove them.
And keep in mind, Mike, I didn't even add this. Billy's not getting credit.
Right. That's right.
So, like, as the songwriter, musician, Billy is not getting credit for any of this.
That's why he's coming out now, because can you imagine going your whole life, the last 53 years, writing the music that he's written, and nobody knows who the hell Billy Shepherd or Billy Shears is. Nobody knows who that person is. Everybody thinks a dead guy wrote the music. Somebody who passed away 53 years ago wrote all that music from late 66 on. So now people are going to argue with me, and there are going to be people listening to this and say, well, he deserved it because he entered into this knowingly and it's been a deception. I understand that argument, but I also understand that in the world in which they operate in, I'm talking about Billy, the Elites, the Blue Bloods, that's their world. That's how they operate. That's how the music and entertainment industry works. We can go and take a look at any number of actors and actresses who didn't use their real name. They had stage names that they kept. This happens all the time. So, I mean, I understand the argument both ways. I can sympathize with Billy on one hand, Vince, me personally, based upon the things that you said. I can also understand the position which says, but you know what, Bill? You didn't have to do this. And a piece of it, you did do it, and I would say probably a big piece of it, is because you wanted the fame, the fortune, and the money. And as time went on, as you got older, you sat back and then you started to reflect and you started to become more introspective about your life. Because when you're in your 30s and 40s and you're doing this stuff, you're thinking to yourself, you have your whole life ahead of you.
Yep.
You're living in the moment. You're making a lot of money. Like you said, you got the women, you got the fame and fortune. People are loving you. They're treating you like a god. And then, boom, you hit your 70s. Talk about Vince McMahon, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Bro, I'm that way at 58.
Yeah, you reach a point where now all of a sudden you become very reflective and you're looking back and you're thinking, nobody knows who I am.
Yeah, jeez. Yeah.
What's my tombstone going to be? Blank, And so that's why this is coming out now. So obviously, I mean, I don't know this for sure, but I mean, it has to work out this way. He received the green light to start to disclose who he is so that when he passes away, people will know that the person that was in the Beatles from 1966 on, late 66 on, and all through Wings and the solo career was Billy Shears or Billy Shepherd. So I think that that's something that the powers that be, they believe that they owe him. That's something that's in the contract that
because
he can disclose.
Can you imagine, Mike? Can you imagine like accomplishing what he accomplished for the last 50 plus years and not having a legacy as Billy? He's got no legacy.
No,
there's his legacy is a facade.
Right.
Mike, here's the part of the book, and this was like the last thing I read. Like I said, but I think I got 30 pages left, but this was the last thing I read. Now, I read this thing, and this was my conclusion from this. 3 things. Number one, either whoever wrote this book is a absolutely complete asshole. That's number one. Number two, biological Paul is alive and well, and he is the one orchestrating this whole thing. Okay, this is biological Paul. He made this shit up himself so he could have a career well into his 80s. And me and you, Mike, would be here talking about it today. Okay, that's number two. Or number three, this book is 100% accurate, because you would have had to be an asshole to talk about it this way. You would have to be the real Paul McCartney to talk about it this way, or you would have to be Billy Shears. And here's the chapter that touched me the most. The chapter on Linda.
Yeah.
Because, bro, if you're talking about your love of this woman, in book form for the world to read, and just pouring out how you feel about this woman and, your soulmates and everything she meant to you, and like you're making this shit up, like you're an absolute asshole. Okay. Yes. Now, if you're Paul McCartney, biological Paul, you could be feeling that way about Linda, obviously. But if you're Billy Shears and Linda knew who you were, I love that story you told yesterday. Billy, guy's here to fix the guitar.
Right.
Okay, bro, then that part, I mean, man, that to me, Mike, the depthness of his love of Linda, that superseded any red flag I had. Because, bro, if you're making this up, you are one heartless SOB.
Yeah. No, it comes through in the book that he absolutely loved Linda and they were in love. It also comes through, Vince, that he loves his kids and his family. That's the other thing. And so, so I mean, look, you mentioned three options here. So I believe it's option number three, obviously. First of all, the book is loaded up with too much detail for somebody to make it up. In other words, if you're going to make something up, you'd have to connect all of the dots. And in the book, everything is connected. Yeah. It would be
Mike, this is like, seriously, guys, if you read this book, and I'm going to recommend it strongly, the only way I could put it, bro, is, the imagination, bro, you got to be Stephen King times a million to have this type of imagination. It's not believable at all, bro. That somebody literally could sit down and make up these 660. It's not believable.
No, it's not believable. And that's what I tell folks, Vince, when they say to me, well, I don't know if the book is true, it's fiction. I said, have you read it? I always get crickets with that, by the way. People who always say that. Yeah, they haven't read the book. I say, look, do yourself a favor. And it's not because I'm hawking the book. Like I said in the beginning of the show, I used the book because I stumbled upon it. And when I read it, I decided to use it as a springboard for my own research. That's it. I had a very difficult time disproving the book and debunking the book. I found that as I went into the research, I was validating it. So if you're really interested in this conspiracy, again, and it encompasses so many things, so many aspects of how our reality is being controlled, read it. Just pick it up and read it. I mean, what harm can it do? If you decide you don't like reading it or whatever, just, I guess just put the book down and go do something else. But if you really want to try to get a handle on what this is all about, take your time, read it. 666 pages. Yes, it's a big book, but you're not in a race. Take a couple of weeks, couple of months and read it.
All you have to say is, if Vince Russo can read this book, you can read this book. That's what they'll understand that. I want to, Mike, we're going to wrap this up soon, because I swear I could talk to you for 8 hours. I mean, there's no question about it. I want to tie up some like little loose ends, stuff around this story. First of all, and I had this question for you, man. You get granted to go backstage. Okay. What do you say? Tell me, Mike, you got 5 minutes. Bro, there's you and him in a room. 5 minutes. What do you say?
I've been asked that before. And I guess what I would say is, I would say, hello, William. It's a pleasure to meet you. And I read
and hope he wouldn't say anything.
I would tell him, I read your biography. I very much enjoyed the memoirs of Billy Shears. You know,
Would you really say that, Mike? That would take a big set to say that, Mike.
yeah, I would say that because that's who he is. You see, that's the thing. That's who he is. A lot of times we're just afraid to confront
Yes.
what the truth is. You know, oh, I don't want to say that. I don't want to offend him. But the thing is, I know at this point that Billy wants people to know who he is. Now, on page 326 of the book, there's a footnote. And in that footnote, it says that Billy enjoys, let me just see if I can find it here for a second, Vince. Bear with me 1 second. So
Yeah,
page
no,
320.
I'm going to look while you look. 320. Would you believe I opened the book up to page 326?
Yeah, look at the footnote. So if you look at the footnote and you go to the second paragraph, it says some videos at www.jamespaulmccartney.com impressed William, but one troubled him when it said he hates Crowley. And so it goes on from there. Well, www.jamespaulmccartney is my URL. It's my domain.
Mm-hmm.
It points to my Paul is Dead YouTube channel.
Right.
So I had no idea this was going to be in the book. So Billy is watching my videos.
Mm.
So, and the reason why I'm bringing that up is not to pat myself on the back. It's to say that I wouldn't have a problem.
He'll know who you are.
Saying, hello, William.
He knows who you are.
Yeah. So he knows I know who he is, and he's watching my stuff. So I am jumping to a conclusion here that wouldn't work, but I'm thinking, well, you know what? I think that we can have a conversation. I don't think it would be a very long conversation.
Right.
You know, but I think that he would acknowledge the fact that I have pieced the puzzle together to a large degree, and that's what Billy's all about. I mentioned earlier, Vince. He likes to put the puzzle out there.
He likes to play, bro. This wasn't my next question, but you're leading me to the next question. He likes to play. Look at the Letterman interview.
Yeah.
He's telling you that would be me. Like he's telling you that would be me. And a lot of people, Mike, are basically saying that Letterman is in it, as deeply as Paul is, Letterman's Illuminati. Otherwise, because, bro, if you and I are sitting next to him and he's answering it that way, we're just going to let that go.
Right.
I mean, that was all contrived.
Right.
I mean, that back and forth. And like I said, bro, he's telling you, yeah, bro, the pavement was red hot. So I took my shoes off and walked across it. Like, okay. And then when he says for Letterman to go through that line of questioning and say, yeah, that would be me, and Letterman not respond.
Right. So Letterman asks, so they claim that there's a double. And Billy says, yeah, right. Well, that would be me.
Yeah.
Right. That's masterfully speaking. And so he's telling us. And so what's interesting about it is, the audience is laughing and chuckling and they're not getting it. But Letterman is a high-level Mason.
Yeah.
Okay. He is also. So you have two very high-level Freemasons sitting next to each other, masterfully speaking between the two of them and playing the audience. And there are going to be people that will understand exactly what's going on. Once you understand the technique, you can decode it. And but the vast majority of the people out there, Vince, the 99.9% of the folks sitting in the audience, maybe 100%, did not get it. And like you said, when Billy says on the Abbey Road cover that he kicked his sandals off because it was so hot, what he was telling us is, does that make sense to you? Does it make sense that I would kick my sandals off and walk across the street on a hot pavement barefooted? Does that make sense to you? Because if it makes sense to you, you're not using your brain.
Right.
You're not thinking. So what Billy's telling us is think. The reason why I walked across the street that way is because I was supposed to walk across the street that way. It was part of the photo shoot. It was a clue.
Yeah.
You see,
yeah.
That's how it works. And it's amazing how people rationalize the irrational.
Yeah.
I see it all the time, Vince.
Yeah.
People argue with me and all they want to do is just rationalize things. They don't want to critically think. They just want to explain it away because they want to remain in their little corner, in their belief system,
Safe. They want to be safe in their
They want to
bubble.
be safe. They want to live in their little box with the bow
Yeah.
slapped on top of it. And don't you dare tell them there's something outside the box. Do not do that.
Yeah. Now, Mike, let's go real quick. I'm just going to tie up these loose ends, and then I'm going to hit you. You know, at the end, I got one, real specific question I want to ask you. Heather Mills, Billy Bush. She knows, right? This is what she's telling us without her telling us.
Yeah. Heather knows. Absolutely. In fact, I have a clip where Billy showed up for a premiere of the concert for George.
Oh, yeah, his wife. George's wife.
George's wife says, "Hello, Billy." And who's standing right next to Billy? Well, it's Heather Mills. She was pregnant, right? Yeah. And again, I got that email, you referred to it before, where the electrician went in to do some wiring in Billy's studio. And when the door, Linda called out, "Hey, Billy, the electrician's here to work in the studio." So within the inner circle, that's what they call him, Billy.
And then you got the Dana Carvey, which, like, what the frick was that? Like, out of nowhere.
Yes, that was a slip. I'm convinced that was a slip. I'm told that interview never went anywhere. That was an outtake, and that's what I was told. And obviously, it was leaked out there. And Dana Carvey says he met Paul McCartney, and then during the conversation, he calls him Billy. Yeah, that's his name. And so if that's your name, that's what people are going to call you by. People call me Mike. They call you Vince. Yeah. It's just the way it works.
Mike, I was really I knew about the Japan incident.
Yeah.
Okay, bro. Like, how did that get swept under? I mean, that's a big deal. Like, Mike, let me ask you this: if you had to hang your hat on one thing, like that, bro, like that's it. I mean, bro, reading the Japan story, I mean, it's like, bro, like fingerprints don't freaking match up. Like, right. I don't understand. Like, what else don't you understand? So, like, my question is, number one, like, what's that's it for you? And number two, how did this story not turn into a big deal?
Because it got buried. I mean, one of the big things for me was the 6 toes versus the 5 toes. I mean, that's a recent revelation from my perspective. But the 9 days in Japan. So just to give a little background, Billy was doing a tour with Wings. They were going to Japan, and they had to jump through a lot of hoops to get to Japan because he had a prior drug bust. And the Japanese at the time were very, very strict about having anybody come into their country with a criminal record. So they worked it out. And what Billy did was, like, very foolish. He admits in the book it was very foolish. He stuffed his bag full of weed, suitcase. He gets into the airport in Japan. They find it, and Billy winds up in the clink. And the Japanese authorities come to him and say, "Who are you?" "I'm Paul McCartney." "No, you're not." "We know you're not Paul McCartney because we have your fingerprints, buddy. We have fingerprints from Interpol going back to Germany because Biopol was arrested for some ridiculous incident back in Germany, but it was a minor infraction, but they took his fingerprints. So they have
1962. So this is 30 years prior.
Yeah. So they had biological Paul's fingerprints. And so when Billy got arrested, they took his fingerprints. Japanese are looking at it and say, this is not the same guy. So he's sitting in jail. And as he tells it in memoirs, he's kind of sweating it out a little bit. And so the British government intelligence intervened. They got together with the Japanese government and said, yeah, you're going to have to help us out and let him go. And that's how Billy got out of jail in Japan. So what does that tell you? What does it tell you when, I mean, if you think of it from a very simple perspective, he's a singer, songwriter, musician. Why would British intelligence, why would the British government intervene to get him out of jail for bringing the dope that he brought into put in his suitcase? Why would they do anything about that? Well, it's because he's their puppy. He's their baby, Yeah. Right.
And there's also been DNA testing along those lines too, right, Mike?
Yeah. With Bettina Hubers, there was a paternity case that dragged out and dragged out and dragged out. They also did, in that case, they also did a handwriting analysis that didn't match up.
Yeah.
And somehow that case, Billy was able to walk away from it. The way he walked away from it with the DNA was the mother was claiming the child was biological Paul's child, and she didn't realize, the mother didn't know that this wasn't the real Paul McCartney. So he had to submit DNA. And when he did, it didn't match. So she claimed they sent an imposter. Billy got off the hook by saying, see, she's claiming it's my kid. I'm Paul McCartney. The DNA doesn't match. I'm not the father. That's how he got off the hook.
Right.
So she shacked up with somebody else. And as much as she wants to believe that that's my kid, it's somebody else's kid. It's not mine. And technically, he's right. It's biological Paul's kid.
Yeah. And he even talks about in that book, like, bro, you could have DNA tested me 100 times. They wouldn't have been my kids. It was the other guy.
Right. And he says in the book, I'm going to ride that reasoning out. Whenever somebody wants to do any kind of DNA, okay, fine. It's not going to match, which means I am not the father.
Right.
You're not going to prove I'm not Paul McCartney. I'm just going to prove that I'm not the father.
Right.
That's how he's angling this thing. And the handwriting, the signatures didn't match up. And that perplexed the German courts. They were like, well, what, how did that happen? Yeah. So I don't know how they got through that piece of it. I have to be honest. I guess they just kind of shrugged their shoulders, and then who knows, him being him, they probably gave him the benefit of the doubt, and there you go. Case closed. Everybody goes home.
Mike, I got two more questions left here.
Yeah.
Here's one. Because as you dig deeper and deeper in, more people start contacting you. You're still getting new information on a daily basis. Are there times, bro, where you are concerned about your well-being and doing this, or is it the complete opposite? Do you feel, Mike, that you were chosen to get this word and to get this story out?
Yeah, so I have to measure things, Vince. So I get information that comes in, and information that doesn't resonate with me, I won't do anything with, right? Because, you do have to have that concern that you don't really know who you're dealing with on the other end. So I'll give you an example. So going back about a year and a half, 2 years ago, somebody writes me and said, we have an entire dossier on Heather Mills. And we want to send it over to you. And I didn't respond. And it was a no thank you, basically, by not responding. Because I'm not interested in receiving a dossier on somebody, because there's only one way you got that dossier. And it means that you either got it from a place that you weren't supposed to get it from, or you're getting it from people that I don't want to deal with. Mm-hmm. I don't want to get involved in. So when people contact me, and something intrigues me or interests me, I have a dialogue with them. It's typically email. I ask them a bunch of other questions, because what you're looking to do is you want to see if their storyline and their logic stays together, right? I'm looking for if something starts to crack. If it starts to crack, goodbye. I have nothing else to do with those people. So I have to be very careful about and very prudent with what it is I decide to engage in. Now, do I worry about it? No, I really don't, not so much, because I know that Billy wants to get the word out, because Billy wrote the book. Okay, so I think this would be a lot different if I were doing this work and it was 1967, or if it was the 1970s. Then I would say that I probably should be spending my time doing something else, because it wouldn't be a safe place to be. I'll just leave it at that. Okay.
Right.
But now, because of the disclosure, and I am thoroughly convinced he is disclosing that, it's okay. Now, I can tell you the way it does work is that the people that are watching the shows and information coming my way, they sit back. Initially, they sit back and they watch and they listen, and they want to see how credible you are. They want to understand your presentation style. First of all, they want to see if you're professional. They want to see if you're going to be objective, if you're going to use, you're going to be an intellectual about it from the standpoint of using reasoning and logic and through it. You're not going to be bombastic. You're not going to be, come across like some kind of nut job, some kind of wacko. So these people are sitting there and they're watching. And I know this because I've had some of them come forth and say, I've been listening to your shows. And so I've decided that I feel comfortable now. I've decided to send you some information. So they're measuring also. Like I'm measuring from my end. They're doing the same thing. And to be honest with you, that's why, people have reached out to me, are very good sources. This is where I think I probably benefit more than other researchers. I'm not going to say all researchers, but there's a lot of people doing this work. And over the 3 years, I've had some people come forth that are very credible people, And I pledge to them that their identity will remain confidential. There is absolutely no way I'm going to give up anybody, because some of these people could wind up losing a job. I'll just put it that way, or getting a lot less work. I'll just leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not saying people are going to get killed. So I don't want anybody to misinterpret. But
Right.
what I'm saying is there are ways to torpedo somebody,
Right.
to pull the rug out from under them.
Right.
And the best way to do it is you get blacklisted and you get work taken away from you.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in the business, right?
Yeah.
Dries up, you're fucked. So, right. So you have to, you have to be very careful. I have to be very careful to make sure that I don't put anybody in that position, and I won't put anybody in that position.
Yeah. Mike, this has been tremendous, man. I swear, I love the work that you do, man. I'm on top of you. I go to Sage of Quay every day. I promote it. I tell people to go there. But listen, man, if you don't have an open mind, don't. But the reason I love you, Mike, and I'm a fan of yours, is because, it's exactly what you said. People can look at Vince Russo, oh, that crazy Italian from New York. He's out of his mind. He doesn't know what he's talking about. You obviously have put a lot of work into this. You have thought this out. You are so intelligent. You present this in such a calming manner. There is no agenda to bring people one way or the other. It's here it is.
Yeah.
And man, Mike, I just got to tell you, man, you've done such a great job with this. I am such a fan of yours. I really, really hope I was good enough, Mike, where we could do this again.
Absolutely, Vince. Anytime. In fact, I was going to say you have an open invitation to come on my show. Maybe we could talk about your life in the wrestling world. And
Mike, there are so many similarities. You talk about Illuminati, we have to talk about Vince McMahon. There are so many, Mike, there are so many comparisons. I think it would, because the wrestling business is a work. It's a work. It's all a work. It's all built on a facade. There are so many things that come into play. I think that's what piques my interest about this. But I'm sorry it took me long, because you wanted me to read the book first, and I knew I'm not going to serve you justice unless I read this. So that's why I took a little while to read it and digest it. But man, Mike, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show.
Absolute pleasure, Vince. It's been one of the best interviews I've ever done. And like I said, come on my show and we'll talk about your side of the business, and we'll get people to awaken to the reality and how it really works.
Yeah. All right, Mike, I'm going to wrap up. Just don't go anywhere, because I want to personally thank you. But guys, that is it, man. I am telling you, I've been telling you guys about Sage of Quay forever. Check it out. Mike, what's the other website? Because I want to give the exact name about Paul. What's the name? Because I follow that one too. What's the name?
The best thing to do is to go to my hub website, sageofquay, QUAY.com. All of my links are there. It's a hub, so you can hit my Sage of Quay main channel, my Paul is Dead channel. I have a guitar channel where I do guitar repairs, believe it or not. You can hit all that stuff. You can hit my blog, Mixcloud, Spreaker. It's all there.
Yeah. Well, there it is, guys. The great, great Mike Williams. Guys, open your minds, open your eyes, bro, because, you may miss what's not only right in front of you, but what can affect us all in the big picture. I will see you guys right here next week. Okay, Mike, last question.
Yeah.
Billy passes away. What happens?
It's going to be a slow, methodical process of rolling out disclosure. So what I've been told is that there are other projects underway. Some of them are major projects like documentaries. So memoirs, look at Tom Harriet as the project manager for the book part of the disclosure. And there are people who are working on other aspects, like I said, movies, disclosure, documentaries, and so on. And these will be rolled out. The one thing I can assure you is many people I know who do the research are hoping he gets arrested and all this stuff and he gets taken to court. I'm going to tell you right now, not going to happen. Never going to happen. Billy has been a good soldier, a stand-up guy for the pyramid of power. He has moved his way up into the ranks. He's into the illuminated degrees now, based upon how I've pieced this together. He's going out in style, Vince. He's getting a ticker tape parade. He's going to get accolades and a standing ovation. That's what's going to happen. And they're going to pave it. They're going to wrap this thing up so that people are going to have an appreciation for Billy Shears or Billy Shepherd. That's how this is how it's going to end. It's not going to.
So we will know. We will know.
The book says, Billy tells us, full disclosure will happen after he passes away. But between now and then, the disclosure process will continue with regard to more information coming out. There may be, I'm sure Tom may have another iteration of memoirs that might come out, another, like maybe a third edition at some point. And we're getting the clues. Like, as an example, Billy has that video, Who Cares? It's the song from his Egypt Station album, right? Filled with Illuminati symbolism, just loaded up with it. It's oozing with Illuminati symbolism. And at the end of that video, there is a picture of a newspaper. And it says, never a big fan of, and then there's a piece of paper where he writes, don't forget your umbrella, and he puts P. Well, when you read it horizontally, it says, not a big fan of P, Paul. So he's telling us he's not a big fan of biological Paul. That's what he's telling us. It's those types of clues that Billy's going to continue to put out. Now, some people don't like that, right? How dare he say he doesn't like biological Paul? Okay, whatever. I'm not going to get into that. I'm just telling you, if he were biological Paul, he wouldn't be writing, I'm not a big fan of myself.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So that's the disclosure process. So we're going to see more and more stuff like that. And we're seeing, like, Egypt Station is all about the Egyptian mysteries. It's all about mysticism and the occult and the esoteric. That's what that's all about. All kinds of clues on that album cover, as an example, you know. So that's what they're going to do, Vince. And only those that are really paying attention are going to get it. I told Mark Devlin, I don't need somebody to stand at a microphone and tell me that that guy is not biological Paul. I already know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm past that.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm not looking for that, you know, personally. And even
what personally though, Mike, what personally, one question would you want answered? All this 3 years of research, everything you've put into this, what's the one question that you would want answered?
The one question I would want answered is, what's the end game? In other words, Billy and the Beatles, along with the other bands, have introduced a Luciferian theology, philosophy into the culture and the society. I mean, it really full blown, starting in the 1960s. I mentioned earlier, overturning traditional values, Christianity, all that stuff, right? It's Luciferian. It's also, you can look at it as the cult of Dionysus. Look up the cult of Dionysus. You can see everything that represents the cult of Dionysus is happening today, right? Revelry. It's all of the androgyny. All of that stuff is all in, you know, it's all wrapped around the cult of Dionysus. My question would be, how does this benefit humanity? You're doing all this. How does this benefit the world? I mean, I can understand it, but I can't actually piece it together. Like, where are you going with this?
Yeah.
What's the world going to look like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now?
Right.
Because we have seen unbelievable changes in our culture, in our society, Vince, going back, like you and I are close in age. I'm 60, you're 58, right? Think about when we were kids and how it worked with the family and all that stuff in school. It's not the same. Anybody who wants to tell me it's the same, you've been asleep. Okay. All of this drastic change, where is it going? I that's the part I struggle with. And if I had a question to ask Billy, all this work that you did is in support of this Luciferian mindset, of this Luciferian philosophy. So what does the world look like, Billy?
Yeah. But without a shadow of a doubt, you believe they know where it's going.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They know where it's going. I don't know how much, control we have over it. I tell people that, the reality is controlled to such a degree. Everything is manipulated. Everything is controlled, your movies, your media, your politics, your government, your military, your judicial system, your medicine, everything. They got their hands in everything. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's an octopus. It's full spectrum dominance. And so people live under the illusion that they're free because, after work, you can go get a couple of beers or you can go shopping down at Old Navy or Walmart, So that's the question I would have for them. What are we looking at here? What does this mean for everybody?
Yeah.
Because all I'm seeing is a bunch of dysfunction. That's what I'm seeing. Chaos and dysfunction.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing people live in fear.
Yeah. Well,
and people
but
live in
chaos
scarcity.
and dysfunction could be the smokescreen for the big picture.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of this chaos has been created.
Yes.
Yeah. That's great, man, Mike.
I don't have an answer to it. I mean, I have thoughts and stuff like that, but that's for another show.
Mike, in the words of the great John Lennon, how do you sleep at night, bro?
Yeah. Oh, by the way, folks, listen to that song and that John is telling us all about the Billy story.
Yeah.
In the song, How Do You Sleep?
Yeah. And also think about, bro, your friends from childhood, the band breaks up. We're all now going to sling mud at we're all going to sling mud at Paul, through song. I mean, that's just not logical.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Number 9, number 9, number 9, number 9, number 9.
I was walking down this dusty